Im Namen des Haus am Doms und der Katholischen Akademie hier begrüßen zu Afrika Denken 2022, Kolonialismus, Reparationen, Normalisierung, deutsch-namibische Beziehungen. Diese Konferenz hat eine gewisse Tradition hier im Haus und ich freue mich auch sehr, dass wir sie dieses Jahr auch wieder hier stattfinden lassen können. Das Thema ist auch tatsächlich mir ein besonderes Herzen. Ich betreue hier auch den Bereich der Zeitgeschichte und die Beschäftigung mit den kolonialen Verbrechen ist tatsächlich noch eine sehr junge. Es gibt immer noch viel zu wenig Forschung, die es bräuchte auch, um einen wirklichen Dialog auf Augenhöhe zu führen. Die Anerkennung der kolonialen Vergangenheit ist immer noch ein Stiefkind, auch in der Geschichtswissenschaft. Umso wichtiger finde ich, dass diese Tagung hier stattfindet und dass sie stattfindet. Denn auch wenn schon einiges erreicht ist, auch gerade in der Auseinandersetzung um die Frage nach Reparationen, so hat das eben auch gezeigt, dass eben hier immer noch kein Dialog auf Augenhöhe erreicht ist, was auch erklärt, warum die Verhandlungen eigentlich als gescheitert anzusehen sind. Ich danke Ihnen.
Danke. Hallo und schönen guten Nachmittag und bald frühen Abend. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Kolleginnen und liebe Freunde. Mein Name ist Mere von Nepali e.V. und mein Programmträger Entwicklungspolitisches Netzwerk Hessen. Wir freuen uns als Orga-Team von Afrika Denken sehr über Ihr zahlreiches Erscheinen und hoffentlich regen Teilnahme an unserer Konferenz in einer Zeit, die geprägt ist von großen Krisen. Unter Ihnen befinden sich erfreulicherweise viele Diasporen aus Frankfurt und dem Rhein-Main-Gebiet, die zum Teil selbst auch Kooperationspartnerinnen unserer heutigen Veranstaltung sind, die wir gleichfalls sehr willkommen heißen und unserem Flyer können Sie entnehmen, welche Gruppen das sind. Zum Orga-Team der Konferenz Afrika Denken, die in diesem Jahr zum 9. Mal stattfindet, gehören, wie bereits gerade gehört, Dr. Daniela Karlscheuer von der Katholischen Akademie Bistum Limburg. Vielen Dank für die Zurverfügungstellung Ihrer Räume an diesem Tag. Usche Merck, leider heute krankheitsbedingt nicht da. Wir wünschen ihr gute Genesung. Und Julia Manek von Medical International, Helga Rau vom Zentrum Ökumene, jetzt kommt ein langer Name, der Evangelischen Kirche in Hessen und Nassau und der Evangelischen Kirche von Kurhessen-Waldeck. Manchmal muss man Traditionen pflegen und nicht hinterfragen. Sowie Dr. Boniface Mabanza Bambu von der kirchlichen Arbeitsstelle Südliches Afrika CASA, der gerade eben aus Berlin rechtzeitig zu uns gekommen ist und wir freuen uns auch darüber. Dem Orga-Team gehöre ich selbst ebenfalls auch an. Diese Kolleginnen werden fast alle heute partizipativ durch aktive Moderationsaufgaben in Erscheinung treten und diese Veranstaltung sichtbar begleiten. Die im Hintergrund uns tatkräftig unterstützen und bei denen wir uns bedanken wollen, sind unsere Dolmetscherin des heutigen Abends, Sylvie Paleta Nango, für die Technik hier im Haus Johannes Bogle und Dimitri Bogorski und unsere mehrheitlich Praktikantinnen, die uns im Hintergrund unterstützen, Sabrina Rost, Franziska Luba, Vincent Obroth, Moritz Köhler von EPN bzw. Medical International. Wir wollten Sie an der Stelle schon mal um Danke bitten und nicht am Ende so als Anhängsel. Das Zustandekommen dieser Veranstaltung, die im Prinzip bis auf ein paar wenige Monate schlussendlich eine Ganzjahresbeschäftigung für uns als Orga-Team der Konferenz bedeutet, beruht auf tatkräftige finanzielle Unterstützung dieses Jahr durch einmal Miserior und Evangelischen Kirche in Hessen und Nassau. Unser Dankeschön gilt diesen Institutionen und ihren Mitarbeiterinnen, denn sie tragen wesentlich dazu bei, dass diese Traditionsveranstaltung weiter existiert. In diesem Jahr haben wir uns ähnlich wie letztes Jahr für ein Format zwischen 16 bis 20.15 Uhr entschieden. Im Anschluss besteht bis 21 Uhr Zeitfenster für informelle Gespräche. Während der Veranstaltung in Pausen besteht ebenfalls die Möglichkeit zum Austausch und gleichzeitig der Möglichkeit, sich mit Getränken sowie ein wenig Fingerfood zu stärken. Dieses Jahr haben wir uns für eine ausschließlich physische Veranstaltung entschieden, wobei wir aus organisatorischen Gründen auf einige wenige digitale Live-Inputs zurückgreifen werden. Für die Nachtwelt wird diese Veranstaltung filmisch dokumentiert bzw. heute live dennoch ausgestrahlt. Unsere Konferenz 2022 trägt den Titel Kolonialismus, Reparationen, Normalisierung, deutsch-namibische Beziehungen. Das sogenannte Versöhnungsabkommen zum Völkermord an Herero und Nama wurde von der Sonderbeauftragten der Regierung der Bundesrepublik Deutschland und der Regierung der Republik Namibia durch die gemeinsame Erklärung vereint im Gedanken an unsere koloniale Vergangenheit, vereint im Willen zur Versöhnung nach fast 6 Jahren Verhandlungen am 15. Mai 2021 unterzeichnet. Darin erkennt Deutschland erstmals offiziell den Völkermord in der einstigen Kolonie an und bittet um Entschuldigung sowie stellt Wiederaufbauhilfe in Aussicht, mehr als 115 Jahren nach dem Vernichtungskrieg. Bei diesem ersten Völkermord des 20. Jahrhunderts sind mehr als 80.000 Menschen umgekommen. Von den betroffenen Communities der Ovaherero und Nama wurde das Abkommen als solches nicht angenommen. Jahrelang hatten sich Deutschland und Namibia über dieses Abkommen gestritten, stets begleitet von scharfer Kritik wichtiger Ovaherero und Nama-Verbände, die insbesondere ihren Nicht-Einbezug oftmals beklagten und demonstrierten. So kam es 2017 aus ihrem Kreis zu einer weiteren Sammelklage, dieses Mal vor dem US District Court, Southern District of New York. Auch diese wurde abgelehnt. Ferner hatte das Ergebnis im September 2021 für hitzige Debatten im namibischen Parlament gesorgt. Vor dem Parlament in Namibia haben mehrere hundert Menschen gegen das Versöhnungsabkommen mit Deutschland zur Aufarbeitung der blutigen deutschen Nationalgeschichte zuvor protestiert. Das Abkommen wurde bis jetzt von der namibischen Regierung nicht ratifiziert. Die Beziehungen zwischen den ehemaligen afrikanischen Kolonialstaaten und Europa sind generell umkämpft. Frankreich wird in Westafrika mit einer immer stärker werdenden antikolonialen Bewegung konfrontiert. Auch Berlin tut sich im Umgang mit seinem kolonialen Erbe schwer, was, wie er es anlässlich der Rückgabe des Sons von Patrice Emery Lumumba, des ermordeten ersten Premierministers der Demokratischen Republik Kongo, deutlich wurde. Im Vergleich begann die Bundesrepublik sehr früh mit Namibia offizielle Verhandlungen um Reparationen zu führen. Damit hat Deutschland die Chance, mit gutem Beispiel im Umgang mit Genozid und Kolonialerbe voranzugehen. Diese Chance wurde durch die deutliche Ablehnung der betroffenen Gruppen, ich würde sie auch gleichzeitig Expertinnengruppen nennen, verpasst. Der im letzten Jahr noch amtierende Außenminister Heiko Maas verlas Folgendes am 28.05.2021 in Berlin. Unter anderem bedankt er sich bei beiden Verhandlungspartnern beider Länder für diesen, ich zitiere, großen Erfolg und betont, ich zitiere, dass Vertreter der Gemeinschaften der Herero und der Nama auf namibischer Seite in die Verhandlungen eng eingebunden worden sind. Und fügt hinzu, ich zitiere, unser Ziel ist es, einen gemeinsamen Weg zu echter Versöhnung im Angedenken an die Opfer zu finden. Und dazu gehört, dass wir die Ereignisse der deutschen Kolonialzeit im heutigen Namibia und insbesondere die Gräueltaten aus der Zeit von 1904 bis 1908 ganz klar benennen. Wir bezeichnen heute diese Ereignisse, mit Betonung auf heute, jetzt auch offiziell als das, was sie gewesen sind, ein Völkermord. Wir bekennen uns damit zu unserer historischen Verantwortung. Und im Lichte dieser historischen und auch moralischen Verantwortung Deutschlands werden wir Namibia und die Nachkommen der Opfer um Vergebung bitten. Und als Gäste der Anerkennung des unermesslichen Leids, das den Opfern zugefügt wurde, wollen wir Namibia und die Nachkommen der Opfer mit einem substanziellen Programm in Höhe von 1,1 Milliarden unterstützen. Weiterhin sagt er, klar ist auch, gelebte Versöhnung kann man nicht verordnen, aber wir können dafür arbeiten. Zitat Ende. In diesen Auszügen des Statements wird, wie ich finde, das Spannungsverhältnis zwischen Anspruch und Wirklichkeit bzw. historisch-moralische Verantwortung versus politisch-rechtliche Konsequenzen geradezu zwischen den Zeilen fühlbar. Alle diese Gesichtspunkte gilt es nun dialogisch mit Stimmen aus Namibia aufzudröseln. Wir laden Sie nun ein, mit unseren Gästen aus Namibia und somit die Stimmen der betroffenen Gruppen, die Gründe dieser Ablehnung, wie ein gerechter Umgang mit Massengewalt und Genozid aussehen kann und was dieser für die namibische-deutsche Beziehungen zu bedeuten hat, zu diskutieren. Diese Stimmen sind bekannte Persönlichkeiten aus der namibischen Zivilgesellschaft und wir freuen uns sehr, sie unter uns zu haben. Sima Limpert hat gestern aus gesundheitlichen Gründen kurzfristig absagen müssen. Das bedauern wir sehr und wünschen ihr gute Besserung. Sie ist Direktorin der Entwicklungsplanung im namibischen Regionalrat von Hardep. Sie ist Nachfahrin der Witbooi und Fredericks Familien, die den Widerstand gegen die deutsche Kolonialmacht maßgeblich prägten. Sie wird erfreulicherweise von Eveli Meswasa Kamburano vertreten werden, die kurzfristig eingesprungen ist. Vielen Dank hierfür. Alle Referenten werden wir nach und nach vorstellen. Wir starten nun mit unserem ersten Input-Beitrag und dazu bitte ich Julia Manek zu mir. Danke.
Dankeschön auch an dich, Cehai, für die Einführung. Sie sehen ja auf dem Flyer schon. Eigentlich war jetzt ein kurzer Film angekündigt. Leider gab es technische Probleme. Es kann sein, dass im Laufe des Tages dieser Film noch eingespielt wird. Falls es nicht möglich ist, dann werden wir Ihnen allen, die sich angemeldet hatten, per E-Mail einen Link zu diesem Film zukommen lassen. Wir kommen nun zum Teil der inhaltlichen Beiträge. Nach diesem ersten Change im Programm werden wir auch ein bisschen nochmal an den Zeiten feilen und auch versuchen, doch noch mehr Zeit für Fragen nach auch dem Beitrag von Heike Becker, der jetzt folgen wird, zuzulassen. Das heißt, wir versuchen dann in den Pausen sehr klare Ansagen zu machen, wenn es weitergeht, weil Sie sich dann nicht mehr am Plan orientieren können. Vielleicht wundern Sie sich auch, warum wir heute Deutsch sprechen, wo die Referentinnen und auch die Diskussionen dementsprechend auf Englisch sein werden. Und immerhin ist Deutsch ja auch die Kolonialsprache, auf der der Genozid an den Nama und Ovaherero geplant, organisiert und durchgeführt wurde. Gleichzeitig ist es aber auch die Sprache, die heute Stellung beziehen muss, die Kritik üben, die sich einmischen muss und zeigen und aussprechen muss, dass es heute an Deutschland ist, Verantwortung zu übernehmen. Die Referentinnen werden Übersetzung, vielen Dank, bekommen, Sie auch. Für den Fall, dass jemand noch Übersetzung braucht, würde ich Sie bitten, sich da vorne noch ein Gerät zu holen. Ansonsten möchte ich Heike Becker vorstellen und einladen, ihre Kamera anzumachen, beziehungsweise Johannes bitten, Sie auf den Screen zu holen. Wir möchten beginnen einmal mehr auf der Ebene der Nationalstaaten. Hallo Heike, wunderbar. Heike Becker haben wir um eine Einschätzung der Beziehungen zwischen Namibia und Deutschland gebeten, die das sogenannte Versöhnungsabkommen rahmen. Und damit möchten wir beginnen auf der nationalstaatlichen Ebene hin dann zu den Kämpfen derer, die Nachfahren der eigentlich vom Genozid Betroffenen sind, dessen brutaler kolonialer Nachhall auch heute anhält. Und natürlich möchten wir auch dazu kommen, was das für Deutschland und Menschen in Deutschland heute bedeutet. Liebe Heike, du bist gerade aus Südafrika zugeschaltet. Du bist Kulturanthropologin, Sozialwissenschaftlerin, Autorin. Als Professorin leitest du die Abteilung Anthropologie an der University of the Western Cape in Südafrika. Und deine Schwerpunkte liegen in den Bereichen Erinnerungspolitik, der aktivistischen Geschichtsarbeit und den sozialen Widerstandsbewegungen im südlichen Afrika, gleichzeitig aber auch auf antirassistischen Bewegungen in Europa, in Deutschland, in Großbritannien. Und wir schätzen Heike Becker sehr als kritische Stimme politischer Analysen und auch Interventionen, die verschiedenste lokale und auch nationale Perspektiven einbezieht und immer wieder fragt, was hat der Kolonialismus heute mit Deutschland und mit uns, die wir hier sind, zu tun. Und das bitten wir dich, Heike, auch jetzt zu tun. Vielen Dank.
Yes,
Das heißt,
thank you very much.
Ja.
Julia, for the kind introduction. I hope you can hear me clearly now. I've got about 15 minutes to give you some thoughts, and I want to start here with the Namibian-German so-called reconciliation agreement that the chairperson already mentioned in his introduction. So this agreement, or better known as the Joint Declaration of Intent, was signed by the Namibian and German delegations in late May 2021, just about 16 months ago. And according to that, Germany was going to offer a formal apology for the first genocide of the 20th century, and the deal also stipulated additional German development aid.
Sorry to interrupt you, Heike. Here in the room we have a problem with the translation device, and I think everyone who's trying to listen to the German translation, jede Person, die jetzt versucht gerade die deutsche Übersetzung zu hören, hat gerade Probleme, oder? Gibt es eine Person, die uns erklären kann, was da los ist? Es wäre schade, jetzt alle Personen zu verlieren, die die Übersetzung die Übersetzung brauchen. Entschuldigung, kleinen Moment, sorry. Aber du bist sehr gut zu verstehen, das ist schon mal wunderbar. Können wir... Hören Sie es jetzt? Gibt es eine Person? Ja? Kannst du erklären, was los war? Okay, dann I just switched to English in order to... Do you now listen to the German translation? Can you hear it now? Or on which... Auf welchem Kanal bist du, CH? On Channel 1? Okay, gut, danke schön.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for sorting out these technical glitches. I'm glad I'm still able to contribute to your conference today, even though I'm quite far away. I'm speaking here from Cape Town, where, as Julia said, I'm working at the University of the Western Cape, and some of you in the room will know I've also spent a lot of time in Namibia, and in fact I lived in Namibia during the 1990s before I took up my current position in Cape Town. So I just gave already some of the brief ideas about this so-called reconciliation agreement that we were talking about. So we could say that the German government last year finally officially acknowledged the colonial genocide that was committed by its predecessor, the German Imperial Reich, in Namibia. However, there are quite a few important questions that remain. The first one, and I'm going to speak to that in a moment, is to which extent is Germany committed to working through its violent colonial past following decades of avoidance? And what further steps would be needed in dealing with the colonial past? Secondly, perhaps this is also quite an interesting point for discussion. What could it mean, the German-Namibian agreement? What could it mean for negotiating also the past between Namibia and its second colonizer, South Africa? And finally, what solidarities are being forged in moves towards decolonization, racial justice, and redistribution? Two crucial points, of course, we need to look at. The first one is the topic of reparations. The German government, one has to say very clearly, succeeded with this agreement to avoid paying reparations. Development aid can never replace reparations. The federal government has also on numerous occasions insisted that it would not pay a cent more than the funds in the signed agreement to the amount of 1.1, or sometimes it said 1.3 billion euro, which would be paid over the next 30 years. Recently, the demands by the Polish government that Germany should pay 1.3 trillion euros for the death and destruction it brought to Poland during World War II has sparked fresh hope that Namibia can push for a renegotiation of its deal for genocide reparations. As we know, in Poland also 6 million Polish citizens were killed, including 3 million Polish Jews. Warsaw was razed to the ground. So the Polish government is demanding reparations to an amount that is literally 1,000 times more than what Germany committed to pay in Namibia. The German government has, however, declined both the Polish demands as much as it keeps saying that it won't pay any more to Namibia. That's the first point, namely that really when we're talking about reparations, as far as I'm concerned from my analysis, I would say that this agreement certainly does not make any provision for reparations, but simply wants to pay some additional development aid, which is quite a different thing, of course. The second point, of course, has been, and I'm sure we will hear from the Namibians a lot more about that, that the descendants of the victims were largely excluded from the negotiations, unlike what was said by the German government and also by voices in Namibia. Germany celebrated the agreement as a political and moral triumph. However, the Ovaherero and Nama communities and their representatives in Namibia criticized it and said, as they had done for years, that the descendants of the victims had not been properly involved in the process. I'm sure the Namibians will speak to that later on. Just as a brief point, if any agreement between a former colonizing power and the formerly colonized should stand any chance of bringing about true justice and reconciliation, those affected must of course be closely listened to, and that, as many have said, is in doubt. Lastly, there is an interesting question of the international ramifications of the agreement, to take it a bit away from the purely bilateral agreement between Namibia and Germany, namely that there is an underlying conjecture of the reparations issue, its potential international ramifications. Both the German government fears more claims from ex-colonies and also claims from countries such as Greece, which have never received compensation for World War II war crimes. And what Poland has now come forward with is perhaps another example. And secondly, of course, other former empires such as Britain, France, Belgium, and of course South Africa have also been worried about that the acceptance of the colonial past responsibility by Germany might even open floodgates to a surge of claims by formerly colonized nations against their erstwhile colonizers. So we may later on have some more discussion about reparations in the sense of financial reparations. However, I want to make a few points here about symbolic commemorations of Germany's African genocide have also taken place over the past few years. In particular, the repatriation of human remains of genocide victims from Germany to Namibia should be mentioned here. These were human remains, often referred to as the skulls, that were shipped to academic and medical institutions in Germany at the time of the genocide and had remained there until fairly recently. Cultural objects which had been stolen during colonial conquest were also returned to Namibia from the Linden Museum in Stuttgart, and more lately also a number of objects have been returned to Namibia from the Ethnological Museum in Berlin. Though there is this somehow weird heading of that was not a proper return, but permanent loans, also something critical to think about. Other former German colonies have also begun to claim restitution. In 2018, for instance, Tanzania requested the repatriation of human remains as well, which are still being stored in German museums and academic institutions. Currently, discussions have also been brought up about a very large number of cultural objects from Tanzania which are still being kept in Germany. We've also seen some more important recent commitments, for instance, by the German Foundation for Prussian Heritage, the Stiftung Preußischer Kulturbesitz, to return Mama Ngonzo, as the Cameroonian activists refer to their spiritual ancestor statue, until now exhibited at the Humboldt Forum to their community in northwestern Cameroon. There is, of course, the ongoing matter of decolonizing the public space by renaming streets, and in particular in the sense of honoring significant persons from the German colonial and black history. That seems to be also picking up. Just a couple of days ago, news came through that Stuttgart has just announced that it will remain a square after Anton Wilhelm Amo, Germany's first African-born intellectual and university professor in the 18th century. And hopefully this may then also push ahead the long contested issue of the so-called M-Straße in Berlin, that may then also be renamed as Anton Wilhelm Arnold Straße, which has been a long-standing request. So there are, of course, still the issues of the to be renamed streets in the so-called African Quarter in Wedding, and I'm very sorry to hear that Zima isn't well. I was hoping to say to her again that hopefully the next time we'll meet in Berlin, we would meet on Cornelius Fredericks rather than Ludwigstraße. So things seems to have been moving a bit over the past couple of months, particularly, until very recently, and I would say until about last year, however, the attempts of addressing the German colonial past have been rather half-hearted and contradictory. While the reconciliation agreement was presented in Germany with some fanfare, controversy remained, for instance, around the Humboldt Forum housed in the reconstructed Royal Prussian Palace in central Berlin at a cost of about 680 million euro. That's about half the price that Germany had committed to pay in additional development aid to Namibia, if we even would think about that as reparations. That seems to be, or shows again, what a pitiful amount that is. So after the final openings of the last exhibitions at the Humboldt Forum, ethnographic collections are now being exhibited to a very large extent again in the historical center of Imperial Germany. The Humboldt Forum, of course, has been at the center of highly critical responses from many anti-colonial and black community, civil society organizations, cultural workers, historians, and anthropologists in Germany and beyond. I would also like to mention very briefly, there's still no move to commemorate the victims of German colonial violence and genocide in a central place of remembrance most likely in Berlin, as something that has been also demanded for many years, similar to the other memorials, such as the Holocaust Memorial that we already have in Berlin. So the question remains how much real change has come now from some of these symbolic engagements with the colonial past. The first point, of course, is again really that proper reparations are important. The Ovaherero and Nama people in Namibia have suffered economic deprivation and social disintegration as a consequence of the genocide. And obviously there must be some kind of financial reparations. However, a future-oriented trajectory, I want to point out, also means that Germany's culture of remembrance has to face challenges for the country to understand its own history within European colonialism. Today, the colonial roots of racism and inequality, as well as the systemization of racial studies and eugenics in Nazi Germany, continue to raise questions about the politics of remembrance and decolonization. They challenge public debates in Germany that have frequently posited colonialism and Holocaust memory against each other. And in order to move away from this misconceived notion, a very misconceived notion in mine and other colleagues' views, new cross-community and transnational solidarities are needed. There are some good examples already. For instance, when hastily buried human remains were found at the site of the former Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, now part of the Free University in Berlin, it became quite clear they could have been remains of Nazi crimes, or they could have come from colonial era anthropological collections. And in a very positive and perhaps promising development, this gave rise to new solidarities where representatives of Jewish, Black, and Sinti and Roma communities in Berlin started to work together to ensure that these human remains were treated with dignity. I think we also need to be very clear, as problematic as this so-called reconciliation agreement is, and its many faults, it is owed more than anything else to the post-colonial remembrance activism for about 15 years by civil society activists in Germany and in Namibia. I would also like to mention that indeed after the agreement was publicized in late May last year, on the very same afternoon, Alliance took also to the streets of Berlin. I was glad I was part of this group to protest against it. So there were not only dissenting voices in Namibia, but also in Germany. And it was interesting also to see that at this point, campaigners of long-standing were joined by young activists who had grown up from the Black Lives Matter movement just about a year ago. So perhaps we can, I want to finalize by saying that despite its many faults, the joint declaration can become hopefully an impetus for the former colonial rulers and the formerly colonized to finally begin a meaningful conversation about the difficult divided history. The question for me is really also to move away from looking just at governments. So the question arises as to whether civil society in both Germany and Namibia can foster a solidarity-based transnational policy of reconciliation and justice. And for the German society specifically, I would say the main challenge is also to move away from the idea that colonialism was an issue that affected, as they often say, not us, but the others, the British, the French, but instead to accept that for Germans to develop new ties of solidarity with Namibia and of course with the other former German colonies, certainly the important question would be, what does colonialism have to do with me? I thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank für diese kritische und gleichzeitig inspirierende Einordnung, politische Analyse. Du hast es vielleicht nicht gesehen, aber hier im Raum hattest du die volle Aufmerksamkeit aller Zuhörenden und der Raum ist sehr voll. Wir haben jetzt in Anbetracht der Zeit, kannst du mich hören gerade? Heike? Ja, wunderbar, okay. Im Raum gedacht, wir würden gerne die Möglichkeit für 2 Rückfragen geben. Und wer eine Frage hat, hebe doch bitte jetzt die Hand.
Yeah, I thank you very much. I really appreciate your presentation. It was very informative. But I would like to ask you one simple question. Do you believe the negotiations and the negotiators are of equal power? Because for a negotiation over reparation or over anything to bear fruit, the 2 negotiators have to be of equal or equitable power.
Ist die Frage angekommen?
If I understand, I think the colleague is asking a very important question indeed, that of course when we are talking about the negotiations between Germany and Namibia, we are talking about negotiators with very uneven power relations. I think that is obviously very much at the basis of the problem of the agreement, and which of course also I think would be at the root that, namely, as I said early on, Germany succeeded to avoid committing to reparations. Even the Namibian government, when this agreement was publicized in its official press release, spoke about reparations. So perhaps even the Namibian government delegation wanted Germany to commit to reparations, but Germany didn't, because obviously Germany is indeed the more powerful and the much more powerful and the dominant power in the room here. So yes, I think it was a very good question to point that out, and I would always say that this is obviously the main problem, that we are talking about any of these possible negotiations happening between the former colonial powers and those that were formerly colonized, whether the former colonial power is Germany or Britain or France or whoever else.
Okay, vielen Dank für diese Einschätzung. Die fragenstellende Person nickt. Ich glaube, die Frage wurde zufriedenstellend beantwortet. Eine weitere Frage würde ich jetzt noch zulassen.
Thanks for your very interesting speech. I have just a brief question. Did I understood you right that in the end you suggested to put a little bit the power or the force or the pressure away from the state towards more the civil society organization? And I was wondering why you suggest that, and isn't it at the same time very important to blame and shame the German state and the government, especially in these times, to really talk about justice or reconciliation? Thanks.
Okay, I think that's another good question. Of course, the German government and the German state need to be shamed and they need to be changed for particularly also decades of completely avoiding the issue of German colonialism and its ramifications and its terrible consequences until now. But on the other hand, I think that it is also important to look into civil society and the kind of connections that are happening, on the one hand transnationally, between, say, organizations in Namibia and organizations in Germany. And there have been connections, of course, happening. Organizations such as, for instance, Berlin Postkolonial and the Kolonial have been very active, inviting people. And I remember, for instance, last year in November, SEMA spent about 10 days in Berlin and being not only hosted, but being organized and building connections with some of these German civil society organizations. But I also think that with regard to Germany, it is also important because that would mean also to recognize much more that it's not simply about a state-to-state historical responsibility that we are talking about. But then we are also talking about what does it mean when we are talking about the consequences, when we are talking about the historical legacy, when we are talking about the current presence of colonial thinking after the formal end of colonialism in Germany. And I'm talking here about issues such as racism, but also of issues such as redistribution within the German society. So it goes into both these directions, that we are taking it away from simply talking about the involvement of two nation states. I hope that this has been somehow clear.
Ja, vielen Dank. Wieder Nicken von der fragestellenden Person. Vielen Dank, Heike. Ich möchte daran anknüpfen, dass du sagtest, Sima Leupert war ja auch in Berlin zusammen mit anderen AktivistInnen und damit auch übergehen zum nächsten Diskussionsbeitrag. Das heißt, dich würden wir bitten, dich dann wieder zur Panel-Diskussion am Ende einzuklinken und bedanken uns sehr, sehr herzlich schon mal für diesen super kritischen, so weitreichenden Beitrag jetzt. Genau, zugeschaltet, vielen Dank, genau, nochmal Applaus. Denn zugeschaltet sein sollte auch Evelyn Mswetsa-Kamburona. Oh, das bin jetzt ich. Evelyn, bist du da? Are you there? Sorry. She's there, okay. Und hier im Raum, hier in Frankfurt begrüßen dürfen wir auch Nandi Matsengo. Du bist hier, vielen Dank. Ich werde jetzt beide vorstellen. Und in der Hoffnung, nicht jetzt mich ständig auf diesem Bildschirm zu sehen. Gut, also, Evelyn Mswetsa, vielen herzlichen Dank für deinen schnellen Einsatz, Evelyn. Denn genau, du vertrittst Sima Leupert und hast von einem Tag auf den anderen zugesagt. Die Überschrift dieses Panels lautet: Im Konflikt mit dem Kompromiss Stimmen aus Namibia zum sogenannten Versöhnungsabkommen zwischen den beiden Staaten. Und du bist allerdings gerade aus Südafrika zugeschaltet und Nachfahrin der Ovaherero in Südafrika. Für das Bildungsministerium Südafrikas entwickelt Evelyn als Spezialistin für höhere Bildung wegweisende und sehr kritische Curricula. Sie ist also auch auf der staatlichen Ebene sehr bewandert und auch mit staatlichen administrativen Politiken von innen vertraut. Aber hier spricht sie heute als Vertreterin der DiasporInnen der Ovaherero Genocide Foundation. Zusammen mit anderen Aktivistinnen, darunter eben auch Sima Leupert und Nandi Matsengo war sie die Initiatorin einer Petition, die damals noch sehr neue Bundesregierung aufforderte und immer noch auffordert, direkte Verhandlungen mit den Genozid-Komitees der Nama- und Ovaherero-Communities zu führen und Verantwortung und Gerechtigkeit einfordern. Evelyn, we would like to give the floor to you. And afterwards I'd like to introduce Nandi after your talk, if you're there. Okay, otherwise, just a quick...
Hello.
Ihr Mikrofon? Evelyn, could you turn on your microphone? The technical officer says your microphone is muted.
Okay.
Perfect. Now we can hear you properly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much and good afternoon. We are rethinking Africa in 2020. But there's no way that we can rethink Africa without talking colonialism, without talking reparations, without talking normalization, and in this instance, German-Namibian relations. I'm expected to talk in conflict with a compromise, like voices from Namibia on the reconciliation agreement between Germany and Namibia. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and compatriots, we are expecting voices from Namibia on the reconciliation agreement between Germany and Namibia. But today you are having voices from the Namas and the Hereros scattered from all over the world due to genocide, and we are rejecting this racist, segregational, so-called reconciliation agreement in its totality. My presentation doesn't have an outline. I just want the House or the conference to know and feel what we are going through and how we feel about this agreement. Recently, in South Africa, South Africa's media was in frenzy over the comments made by University of Cape Town political science lecturer, Dr. Lwazi Lushaba, when he said, Hitler committed no crime because all Hitler did was to do to the white people what the white people had normally reserved for black people. The South African mainstream media house and the Liberal Democratic Alliance took the comments out of context. However, we must now consider these comments and the real point that Dr. Lushaba made with reference to the reconciliation agreement between Germany and Namibia. We believe, as the voices from the diaspora, the voices from Namibia, the voices of the Namas and the Hereros, that this reconciliation agreement is racist. Let me elaborate a bit. Although colonialism came to an end more than half a century ago, academics such as Professor Sabelo Ndlovu-Gacheni has posited that the remaining remnant of colonialism is coloniality. One of the localities of coloniality is the coloniality of being, which is based on belief that Nama and Herero people lives don't matter. Maybe because we are black. In order to highlight this point, let's look at the reconciliation agreement by comparing it with the German government and the Israeli people as well as Israeli state. The Nama Herero genocide and the Jewish Holocaust are not to be competed against. However, the German government's selective memory as differential treatment must be called out. The mere fact that the German government struggled to come to an admission that what they committed against the Nama and the Herero people was genocide is damning. I hear people saying they have committed or they have accepted. They have a condition to accepting that what they committed is genocide. Immediately you put a condition, it means it's not true admission. So Germany has not admitted that what they did to us or to our ancestors was genocide. We thought the world had moved to a time where human rights were universally accepted and understood in the same way. Historians have all recorded that the Nama-Herero genocide was the first genocide of the 20th century. Even professors spoke about it earlier on, admitted to it to being the first genocide of the 20th century. The mere fact that this undisputable fact was debated shows that the German government still thinks of black people's lives with disdain. The payment structure in the agreement also smacks of the idea of a white master monitoring the expenditure of the inferior blacks so that they don't waste the master's money. Why is it that when it comes to the Jewish victims of the Holocaust, they can set up a claims conference to administer the reparations for themselves instead of it being administered by the Israeli government? But when it comes to the Nama-Herero people, it is the Namibian government that must administer it on behalf of the Nama-Herero people. Why does money go straight to the Jewish, but it cannot go straight to the Nama and the Herero traditional authorities that are competent to administer the money? The worst aspect is that Namibian and German governments also dictates how much of the money will be spent on what. Are the Nama and the Herero people that cognitive where the money should be spent? It is the Nama and the Herero themselves for them. What the world needs to ask now is why doesn't the two genocides get equal standing by the German government and the German people? An estimated 6 million Jews died at the hands of the Nazi German, while the Namas and the Herero people are today a minority group because the German colonizers killed 80% of the Hereros and two-thirds of the Nama populations. Is this different approach towards the Nama-Herero genocide because they are black? Or perhaps because they are children of the lesser god? After 15 years or more, 16, since the tabling of the said motion by the paramount chief Riruako, the Federal Republic of Germany and the Namibian government has embarked on negotiations on government-to-government level and has finally come to determine a reconciliation agreement, which unfortunately excludes the descendants of the victims of the 1904-1908 genocide, both in Namibia and in the diaspora. Understandably, these agreements are part of bilateral relations which only cover Germany and Namibia, however, excluding Hereros and the Namas outside the borders of Namibia. The 1.3 billion deal signed or to be signed or initialed between the two countries is meant for developmental projects in Namibia and does not include victims outside the border of Namibia. The reconciliation agreement, not reparation agreement, is a treason towards my ancestors who are still lying there in German's museums. We therefore stand opposed and reject the reconciliation agreement initialed or to be signed by the two governments and by the two governments in strong possible terms, as it is a blasphemous attempt by Germany to undermine the demand of the reparations on genocide. It can't be about us without us. Anything about us without us is against us. If you ignore the latter, it means you are not addressing the cause. Given the above, we reject the initial reconciliation agreement negotiated without the participation of the legitimate representatives of the majority of the victim communities with the content it deserves. It is not worth a paper written on, and we urge the United Nations, African Union, and the rest of the international community to reject this gimmick by Germany and Namibia. And we expect them to shout with us. However, in the absence of this voice, the international community or the powers in the world, the people are determined to shout from the wilderness, and we will not give up until we are heard. We demand reparations to all the affected communities who were forced to scatter around the globe due to this gruesome action by the German government to the Herero and the Nama people. We, the Nama and the Herero people, in and outside Namibia, understanding of reparation is that it shall render justice by removing or redressing the consequences of the wrongful acts by preventing and deterring violation. Is there such in that agreement? I haven't seen that, unless that agreement, I read it upside down, or the English or the language that it is written in is not understandable to me. I haven't seen anything that talks to reparation. How do you reconcile if you haven't even gone into reparations? We want to believe that reparation scope and content covers both monetary and non-monetary aspect, and it has 5 forms. We expect restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. If I had time, I would break them down one by one. And these are the things that will sit around the table with the German government as the affected communities and explain to them what we mean by restitution and reach consensus with them what we mean by compensation, what we mean by rehabilitation, where do we need to be rehabilitated. Presently, I'm still undergoing the genocide, and I call it cultural genocide because I cannot even speak my language. I am in South Africa because of genocide. My ancestors are in South Africa because of genocide. The Namibian government, we did not vote for you as a result. We did not give you a mandate to negotiate on our behalf. However, as the diasporians, the voices of the Hareros and the Namas in the diaspora, we exist. You cannot negotiate on our behalf. We do have Ovaherero Traditional Authority. We have Nama technical, we have Nama traditional authorities. They are the people who can speak on our behalf wherever they are, even when they are in Namibia. We haven't voted for Namibian government. Why deny us reparations when you can claim collaterals as a state? Namibian government can claim collaterals from this genocide. Why are they denying us reparations? We are the people who are wronged and can't be about us without us. To German government, you choose to ignore us. Go ahead and sideline us. We are regrouping. You will have to deal with us when done with the Namibian government. My advice is negotiate with us or face us later because we exist. We promise that we shall not be silenced. Our voices from the diaspora shall continue to shout until they are heard. The bones of our ancestors will be accounted to. Our ancestors will get the decent burials they deserve. We shall multiply. We are regrouping. We are uniting. We shall overcome one day. It can never be about us without us. We exist and we cannot be wished away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, for these so clear, so critical words explaining the coloniality of being, the ongoing racism, the repercussions of the German genocide until today, and for making the fight of the Ovaherero and Nama communities so clear and so explicit. Thank you so much. Within that panel, I'd like first to hand the word over to Nandi, who is here sitting with us in Frankfurt, and then give the audience the possibility to ask questions to both of you. Yeah, and I'm going to switch to German, weil eigentlich sollte ich jetzt Nandusora Masengo vorstellen, der, vielen Dank, please come over, der hier in Frankfurt ist. Er will sich selber vorstellen und sagen, ich möchte ein paar Sachen sehr, sehr klar machen. Deshalb, just because you said that you wanted to make things clear, I'm not going to introduce you so much, just saying thank you so much for joining. You're the leader of the Ovaherero Genocide Foundation, right? And much more things. Yeah, so please take over the floor.
That was okay.
And as you said also that you might need a bit more than 15 minutes,
Yeah,
I might then afterwards, maybe after 15 minutes, remember that it's 15 minutes, okay? Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Director of the Proceedings, for the opportunity. Yes, as introduced, I am Nandi Madengo, and of course, I'm elated to be speaking to an issue that for us, from the Ovaherero and Nama people, is not really history, but it's also present-day reality, because it's what defines our lives in the modern state of Namibia today. I'm also privileged to be here with the Namibian luminary Uhuru Dempers, somebody that I, as a young student of political science and history, they have been only observing from a distance, but I think thanks to this invitation and being here, I'm now actually able to meet him up and close. Perhaps we will talk more. So I want to take this opportunity actually at this beginning to say thank you to Dr. Boniface, Goran and Christine and many other friends of our course who have made it possible for me to travel from Namibia and be here this afternoon. Of course, for me being here is really a return to a land that I once came to when I was about 25 years old. It's a bit way back when I came through through Frankfurt actually as a student, as a master's student, and proceeded on to Munster, where I stayed for a year and a half. Of course, my German is gone now. But also Saarland, Saarbrücken, where I also stayed a bit for basic German language. So it's actually familiar territory. Well, just to introduce myself again, as I said, I'm Nandi. I'm the chairperson of the Ovaherero Genocide Foundation. In that capacity, I also serve as the principal advisor to the Ovaherero Paramount Chief, Professor Dr. Mushinde Kashiwa, who was actually elected recently after the passing on of the late advocate Vekwi Rukoro, who was the Paramount Chief of Ovaherero people. And so I serve as his principal advisor, but also as the principal advisor of genocide and restitution affairs for the traditional authority. Of course, Evelyn, who's a colleague of mine, representing us in the diaspora in the South African community there, already spoke to what Ovaherero Traditional Authority is. It is actually a modern successor to the Ovaherero own governing regime, which is more than 150 years old, and it represents a transnational following of over 90% across many territories. It has a following in Botswana, which is a strong diasporan community. It has a following in South Africa, but also increasingly now we also have bigger diasporan communities in the US, in Canada, in UK, and also to a lesser extent here in Germany. This afternoon, also because of a union, a sacrosanct union between Ovaherero and Nama people, which was nurtured in both times of rivalry and camaraderie from disputes over commonly held resources, whether it's cattle pastures or water wells, but equally the dictates of common security and defense as two neighbors, because Ovaherero left in an area that was called Ovaherero land, and the Namas left in the southern part of present-day Namibia in an area, these were sovereign polities actually, in an area that was called Great Namakwaland, and so there were two neighbors. Today, we actually have come together because of that long history of really that long shared history, and increasingly also evidently a shared future. We have come together in many platforms to forge a united front when we are demanding, restoration and justice and all these issues. So I also serve on that platform as the co-chairperson for a joint technical platform of Hereros and Namas. My co-chairperson, or the other co-chairperson, is Sima Leipat, who couldn't be with us this afternoon, as you heard. So she's my counterpart on the Nama side. I'm the chairperson of the Hereros on the Hero side. Of course, also, just to briefly tell you that I was trained in political science, economics, and history, with a focus on development, and before coming to this work, I have worked for about 8 years in government, particularly as a development advisor in the Namibian presidency. So I know exactly issues of development aid, and I can tell when I see them, and I know that this agreement is not about reparations, it is a development aid program. So, so specifically, just as a disclaimer, it was important that I tell you that my intervention in this debate this afternoon is actually influenced by issues that I summarize into 4 broad categories. The first one is that of who I am. Of course, I'm a black African, I'm a Namibian, I'm an Ovaherero. I was born into a society that for a century plus have been subjected to oppression, to exploitation, to dispossession, to displacement, and reaching the apex of the many calamities that had befallen my people is a genocide at the turn of the last century, which was committed by Germans, who later on colluded with the Boers of the Afrikaners to strip bare my society of all its possessions. And these deeds were not committed because we were neighbors of Germans and Afrikaners, and maybe we had a dispute over land or over anything. They were committed because, particularly in the view of the European elite, of the German elite, and perhaps in the minds of other Europeans elsewhere, I have not taken the time to study, but specifically in the view of the German elite, they were committed because we as a people were subhumans, we were savages. We had to give way for the racial hierarchy ideas and the associated concepts of Lebensraum, finding the living space for the superior Aryan race, as espoused by German geographers Friedrich Ratzel, and also the Ressenschanti and the Endlösung concept, which was applied later by Nazi Germany, but first experimented and perhaps perfected on my people by commander of the Schutztruppe, General Lothar von Troda, who issued an extermination order. And of course, many of these things, in particular the extermination order against our people, was issued with the active participation and consent of Kaiser Wilhelm II. And so it is that which really, all this concept of racial hierarchy and really ending Lebenswerten, Lebens, a life unworthy of a life, ending this life of savages so that they give way to a superior race. All of these were some of the things that were done. And so I come to this discussion fully understanding some of these concepts. The second also, and linked to that, is that I am a scholar of these issues, and so I understand perfectly their theoretical underpinnings, and I have strong views, for instance, in respect of the Joint Declaration. I have a strong view of the role that is assigned to a government in an egalitarian pluralist society such as that of Namibia. I know, for instance, that sovereignty or the right to self-govern remains solely with the people, unless and until that right is expressly surrendered on issues where representation is sought and secured through an election. In that context, I am convinced that all issues that a government, however big a majority it has, if it has not sought a mandate from the people to speak for it on certain issues, such as these issues of restitution, restoration, and justice of Ovaherero and Nama people, then that government has no mandate to do that. And that is why in advanced democracies, mostly around this continent, on any issue, you would see that a government, especially if it's fundamental to a people, it will run a referendum and ask for permission to speak to that issue. The governing SWAPO majority in Namibia has not sought that mandate from Ovaherero and Nama people, and we have not given that mandate. So the colleague Evelyn had really spoken to that, and so they have no mandate to wrestle that authority from us and appropriate it to themselves. It is undemocratic and an illegality to do so. The third category, of course, is what I earlier spoke to say that I have worked as a development advisor in the presidency for a long time, and so I can discern the difference between reparation and development aid. And of course, I said this is development aid, and I am also under no illusions that this is development aid which would necessarily reach the communities that, quote unquote, are targeted. Once it gets into state coffers, the state really does whatever it wants with it. And of course, the fourth one is what I'm doing here, so which is that I'm here for reparations, or that my current assignment is about reparation, and what I see in the joint declaration has nothing to do with it. Of course, I know that many of us in this room do not have context and history to the issue at hand, so I'm told I don't have much time, but I would have wanted to quickly run through that history, but maybe for now I should just skip it. Is that?
You can, because the following was also here. He kind of was okay also to share more time, so I'm sorry to have bothered you. Please continue.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because I know fully well that European colonial history in much of Europe is a highly neglected subject matter. In most of your schools, it is not taught. If taught, or maybe just mentioned vaguely, otherwise it is altogether ignored. So I think just briefly, we all know, and there is no contestation, that Germany was a latecomer to imperialism. And that, of course, that is so as compared to France, Britain, of course, Britain, they call themselves Great Britain, Netherlands and Portugal, Germany, who already by, the mid-19th century, they had established themselves as European colonial powerhouses. Germany, owing much to Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, who was a reluctant imperialist, came very late to the party. Of course, by that time already, in my own neighborhood in Southwest Africa, present-day Namibia, and specifically in the sovereign polities of Ovaherero land and Great Namakwa land, respectively, there were already established contacts and a presence of German missionaries, and it is these missionaries who were sort of urging the Chancellor Otto von Bismarck to take ownership of the German of Southwest Africa possession, but he was reluctant because he said it was too risky a financial undertaking, and so he had no interest in imperial expansion. So he took a private German citizen by the name of Adolf Ludwitz through an agent to actually go out to Namibia in 1883 and, quote unquote, enter into a sale agreement or a sale transaction with the Nama leadership of the Great Namakwa land, one portion of it, to buy coastal land. Of course, if you look at the terms of that, it was not really a sale agreement or a sale transaction, it was just a cheat of the Nama people out of their land. So it is only this private citizen, once he acquired this land and there were issues of how they could not run this land, that actually Chancellor von Bismarck agreed to bring that piece of land under German state protection. So that's how it all started. But of course, in 1884, there was now a rush for African land, and the Scramble for Africa as a conference was convened in Berlin. And out of that conference, Germany took possession of course, heading to Southwest Africa, which encompassed the Ovaherero land and Great Namakwa land, the land of the Hereros and the Namas. Germany also took possession of modern-day Togo, Cameroon, Tanzania, Rwanda, Samoa, New Guinea, and various other Pacific islands, such as Nauru. Within just a decade, that expansion had seen Germany actually grow to be the fourth largest colonial empire after Britain, France, the Netherlands. And of course, following that, the first imperial commissioner, Heinrich Goering, was actually deployed to German Southwest Africa. That is in 1885. And of course, we know who Heinrich Goering was. He was the father of Hitler's right-hand man, Hermann Goering, who later on would become a key figure in Nazi Germany. And of course, this speaks directly to the link between the Ovaherero Nama genocide and the crimes of the Nazi regime in the 1930s. Young Goering was a good student of his father. He absorbed the racial hierarchies that created the genocidal gaze in Ovaherero and Great Namakwa land at his father's feet, and would later apply this in Nazi Germany against yet another group that was deemed inferior by Germany with utter precision and intensity. Of course, once in Southwest Africa, no imperial commissioner, Heinrich Goering, began to immediately pressure established leaders of established sovereign polities of a Herero leader who at the time was Samuel Maharero, and there was Samuel Maharero, there was Maharero the elder, but also on the Nama side, there was a formidable Nama leader, Hendrik Witbooi, and many other leaders. They were all being pressured into what was called protection treaties. And these were not treaties that offered protection. They were really trips to cheat the natives out of their land. But as more and more of the Herero and Nama land was being wrestled away through these arrangements, our people decided to resist this German military or this German encroachment on their land. And so they rose up in self-defense. It is estimated that by the end of 1903, 3.5 million hectares out of a total of 13 million hectares of a Herero land had already been lost to German settler colonialism and railroad construction. As cattle headers, of course, Hereros faced a perilous future because they would not, of course, with their land being eaten into, it meant some sort of diminishing of the way they had left throughout. And that tragically did end as a consequence of the genocide, the concentration camps, and the appropriation of their land and cattle later on. And of course, when they realized that the Germans had no benign intentions of good neighborliness, as they were claiming, the Hereros, but of course they saw that the real objective was really to dislodge them from their land, their heritage, their livelihood. On January 12, 1904, from the central town in present-day Namibia called Okahanja, the Hereros rose up, and in the beginning they scored some notable successes against the German Schutztruppe, but of course after some serious planning and reinforcements from Germany, and also a withdrawal of the Schutztruppe commander at the time, who was Theodor Ludwig, who was withdrawn because he had allowed an inferior race to score successes against Germans. And he was replaced by a ruthless commander called Lothar von Troda, who came already armed with an order to exterminate Herero people, to get rid of this black problem in their own land, so that way is created for Germans who are a superior race to settle there. And of course, so when he arrived in the territory after reinforcements, week after week, on the 11th of August 1904, he launched the decisive battle that would really spell the end of Ovaherero land as it was. And after chasing them, once they have been militarily neutralized, killing children, killing men and women, everybody armed or not armed, on the 2nd of October, he issued what historians actually agree it was the first time that a policy of extermination order, a state policy against the whole people, was issued, and that is what set the road to the first genocide of the 20th century. On the 2nd of October, he issued that proclamation standing at the village of Odombuda Vindimba that all the Ovaherero people must leave their motherland, and those who do not leave, they will be shot dead, and that is why some who survived actually are the forebears of my colleagues like Evelyn, who today is a South African, yet an Ovaherero just like me. She cannot speak Shiherero, and she has lost everything else, but at least they have retained their allegiance. There is still a connection, people to people. They have retained their loyalty to the leadership of the Hereros back home and all of that. Of course, having watched closely how the northern neighbors of Ovaherero were being disposed of by Germans, the Namas in the south actually in that very same month of October decided that they too must rise up against the Germans, because they knew very well that the Germans would turn to them next. And so once they did that, the following, of course, von Trotha also turned to them and he sent his troops, and he was almost done with the Hereros because many of them he had killed, and a good number of them had taken refuge in the wild to eating anything they could actually find. And that is how actually 80% of my people were killed by the German Schutztruppe. But also, on the 23rd of April the next year, which was 1905, von Trotha also issued a similar order against the Nama people. And all of this were proclamations, state policies that were consented to at the highest level. The Wilhelm II, the Kaiser, actually actively, participated in all of this. So of course, the battle with the Namas lasted for a longer time because they were savvy in guerrilla warfare. They would hit and run, and so they attacked German installations, and they could hold the supplies, the reinforcements. What was that? Sorry. Yeah, and so that took a while. Up to 1907. And of course, once they were fully neutralized and surrendered, with the coalition of the church, and I'm glad I'm a host of I'm a guest of the church, with the coalition of the missionaries, our people had taken refuge in the wild, fearing for a return. The church was recruited actually to send a false message of them having been pardoned, that they must return to villages and towns. It is in these towns where they were rounded up and thrown into concentration camps. And so the concentration camps actually continued the extermination, because in those camps, people were worked to death. They were, especially in the south, there was, most of these concentration camps were opened up in Windhoek, in Karibeb, in towns of Okahanja and Sokomon, which were the bigger centers. But there was one special one which was opened on an island called Shark Island, on a place that took the name of Adolf Ludwig, and that was what actually provided a blueprint for what later on the Nazis would perfect as the death camps, because that camp was not for, it was not really for sourcing cheap labor from. It was meant for people who were deemed unworkable, and so you would be thrown there. You would be underfed, and once basically 17, 20 people were dying on a daily basis, and they would be fed to sharks. Because it was also so cold in that area, and that was really a camp where most of the Nama people were actually concentrated. Because of their small physique, they were seen as unworkable and of no use to the colonial economy. So they were mostly dumped there, and some were also banished to other territories of Cameroon and Togo and elsewhere, where they also died in bigger number. So, of course, that is the brief history of that, and through that, of course, the German reign in German Southwest Africa, because they had now firmly established themselves as a colonial master in that territory, and of course, this had to end abruptly, because when Germany lost the First World War, she also lost her colonial possessions. And so Namibia, or German Southwest Africa, was taken over as a trustee mandate territory of Britain to be administered by South Africa. And of course, that, as we learned, also became another problem, because it took about 7 decades for South Africa to relinquish her grip and allow Namibia as a modern state to be born in 1990. Because even when the UN and everybody else had said she had no right to exercise or to remain in Namibia, South Africa had refused, saying that mandate lapsed when the League of Nations ended and the UN took over, and so she actually attempted to incorporate Namibia as a 5th province of South Africa, and effectively ran Namibia as a territory of South Africa for all those years, 70 years or so, and that is why also as a country we would then become victims of whatever policies of segregation and apartheid were applied in South Africa. They were also applied in Namibia. So, of course, a consequence of that war, 65,000 of Ovaherero people perished, that is 81%, 50,000 Namas perished, 50% of the Namas, that is 10,000 of a total of, which was about 20,000. They died from the Schutztruppe. Hereros were punished from their own land. That's why Evelyn and many others are elsewhere. A quarter of Ovaherero and Nama land, originally about 50,000 square miles, and a countless number of cattle were seized without compensation by German colonialists, with the explicit consent of German colonial authorities. Today, that original Ovaherero and Nama land sits in the hands of German and Afrikaner great children, the children of those who stole it from us. They, to a large extent, still sits on our land unapologetically. And many of them are behaving just like what Evelyn alluded to there. Some of them are even deniers of this whole history, and they claim that they have bought this land, or their parents have bought this land. Of course, our people since that war have tried to rebuild through their own agency. Of course, they have rearranged their society and so forth, but of course, it was a monumental loss, and it will take some time before we can really say we have arrived. Now, briefly also just to talk to our position about the joint declaration. Of course, we know that for a very long time, the Namibian government has not been a very, very keen participant on this question, and that has sort of given useful condition to the German state, which conveniently sought to remain detached from its unprecedented an uncivilized history of racism and violence for so long as it could keep it in the dark. Because in Namibia, or the new Namibian state, have seen any talks or push on this issue as muddling the German-Namibia bilateral relations. And so the Namibian state, through walking over that chapter, has facilitated the neglect of that history, but importantly has also facilitated Germany's ability to thus far evade her responsibility to account for her racist and genocidal past. However, it took the leadership of our own people, who have always waged the struggle with very little support from the Namibian or from anybody in Namibia. We have, between the leadership of Ovaherero and the Nama people, we have waged the struggle. And so through our paramount chief, he's now late, who was a member of parliament also, a motion was brought to parliament in 2006 to say it is about time that Germany is asked to account for her history in Namibia. And so that motion was of course adopted, but it was actually anchored on 4 pillars. It is those pillars that I would want to talk to and contrast with the joint declaration, whether it fully answers, or that whether it fully speaks to those pillars, because the negotiation between Namibia and Germany should have been about addressing those 4 pillars of the joint declaration. But before I do that, I want to first speak to issues of process or perhaps framework, particularly as regards the issue of representation, which really is a big one for us. And that is why we say, contrary to what the motion speaks to, which is that the representatives of the affected people must be directly involved. What happened was that the current administration of Dr. Geingob, the president of the Namibian state and head of government, when he took over, they appointed a special envoy who was appointed as the sole Namibian voice at the negotiation table. Basically, it's a question of a government wholly appropriating the negotiation process to itself, excluding all else, in direct violation of what the parliamentary motion have said. Number one, this was a parliamentary adopted motion, so it was the parliament itself had to oversee this because it is a co-equal branch of the Namibian state architecture. There was no mandate for the executive actually to take over this. It was a matter for parliament, but parliament in Namibia is very weak, is overrun by the executive. And so they appointed a Namibian diplomat, he's now late, by the name of Dr. Gavirwe, and he was the man representing the government voice. And when the communities actually demanded that they be involved, or that the motion had called for them to be directly involved, they were told to simply become attachés, to join technical processes or advisory structures to the special envoy, who at the level of the state reports to the vice president in the presidency. So it was a clear-cut exclusion of our voices. And so the Namibian government ran with that process, of course, to present an image of being consultative. They have co-opted some puppet groups, some which are mostly families. Of course, they are called royal traditional houses, but these are just families, and because they are also aligned to the governing SWAPO majority, these were the elements who were included in the process. Many of them also, after having claimed for 7 years that they were part of this process, they were actually shocked when the joint declaration was leaked. They could not believe it, the amounts and the things that were talked about there, which was a clear indication to us that they were actually not really involved. They were only paraded as being involved, but in substance they were not. And so, of course, we reject that whole process of a government appropriating the right to speak for us without having obtained it from us, and we see it as an overstatement of the exercise and application of sovereignty by a government as an agent of the state, because as I argued earlier, sovereignty, unless expressly sought and obtained from the people, it remains exclusively vested in the people themselves. And I said SWAPO, as the governing majority, has run a number of elections. They have competed in a number of elections. The issue of genocide and restorative justice of Ovaherero and Nama people does not feature anywhere in their political programs. It is not an important issue for them. There is no remembrance day for the victims of that era. There is no memorializing, anything sort of a monument, of a fitting monument erected to remember that era. So we say it is a shameless attempt to wrestle representation away from us as the owners of the struggle. And it is an outright illegality and criminality that we say has no justification in law and politics. And we say the idea of a state or a government as espoused by the administration in Windhoek, thinking that once you are elected into office, then you assume representation over people on all issues. We reject that idea because we say that is absolutist representation, and it is not in sync with the tenets of democratic, inclusive governance. And so as a people, we reject it. Now, on the issues of content, what is in the joint declaration? For instance, the first pillar of the joint declaration talks about, actually the first pillar of the motion says that Germany must admit guilt. And of course, with guilt comes legal capabilities. Germany must admit guilt to the crime of genocide against Ovaherero and Nama people, as sanctioned by General von Troda, an agent and deployee of Kaiser Wilhelm II, who was the highest German authority. So the first thing that has to be achieved, or that had to be achieved by that process, which took 7 years. Am I good? No, I have to finish.
I'd ask you to
Okay. Okay.
make your last.
Okay, the first thing that had to be achieved was guilt. Germany, seemingly the sole author of that text, because if you read that text of the joint declaration, you don't see the Namibian government writing anything there. You see the Germans actually writing that whole document and dictating, and the Namibian government just acquiesced. Germany declines that guilt. In fact, it denies it because it says, at the time of killing of Ovaherero people, these were savages. There was no law forbidding them. Of course, it employs master-class statecraft language of saying, it is only a genocide from today's perspective. That is the language that they're using. And of course, the uneducated and those who don't read things carefully and between the lines, they are now telling us that Germany has admitted guilt to genocide. It only says it is a genocide when you look at it from today's perspective, meaning it was not a genocide then, because the people who were killed were not people. It is only a genocide today. So that is the first thing, and that is denial. So Germany denies that it was genocide. The second thing that flows from the first pillar is that once you admit genocide, and inherently by international law, once you admit guilt to a crime, you must pay a penalty. Now, the penalty for genocide is already defined, is reparations. But because Germany denies that, naturally under Pillar 2, they will not pay reparations because they are saying it is not a genocide. Of course, there are others who are claiming that this development package is reparation. Let's not be bogged down in semantics. But Germany denies Pillar 2, naturally it denies Pillar 1, naturally it also denies Pillar 2. The third is the only so-called victory of the joint declaration, because suddenly Germany says it would apologize to Ovaherero people and it would apologize, not actually to Ovaherero people, but to the Namibian government. So now this begets the question of, if you deny guilt and you don't want to pay reparations, what are you apologizing for? Of course, because it's shallow, it means nothing. It does not confer any legal culpability. They are prepared to say the shallow words of "we are sorry," whereas they are not really sorry. So we reject all of that. We reject that apology before it even comes. On the fourth pillar, again, that is the one that I have spoken to, that the government, which under that motion was actually mentioned as an interested party, they have now appropriated the whole process to themselves. That is for us is a non-starter. And then, of course, there are just some comments that I wanted to make. Of course, we see contradiction when the German Foreign Office is talking. From the political and diplomatic front, they want to project themselves as a modern state that wants to come to terms with its history, that wants to build bridges between communities. Yet in the halls of law, in courts, they are filing papers that says these were savages. There were no laws that protected these people. So they are playing a double game. And there is an argument also that is touted mostly by the politicians who were close to the process, and that has to do with the apparent division amongst our people. That our people are so divided, and therefore they wouldn't know who even to talk to. Well, to that, as Ovaherero and Nama people, we can only say, I think Germany is the last country to talk about, to lecture anybody actually about jointed politics. Because here is a country that since the Second World War has probably only had 2 single-party majority governments because of fractured politics. Because of divided politics, they every time almost after elections have hung parliaments, have coalition governments, so they are really the last one to lecture us about division. It is an idea that we reject, that when Africans or black people have dissenting views in pluralist societies, it is division, but in Europe, when they are fractured and they have dissenting views and they cannot form a government for months, apparently that is democracy. So Germany is the last one to lecture us about that.
Nandi, I'm sorry to stop you, because this is a very much needed criticism on German politics and an understanding of the Federal Republic.
Okay, just to finish off. I think as a way forward, what we would really want is the debate or the discussion to return to genocide as a legal construct. Because genocide is a legal construct. Yes, it has political and moral elements, but ultimately it is a legal crime. It was defined as such by the United Nations, the 1948 Convention on the Crime and the Punishment of the Crime. I mean, on the prevention and the punishment of the crime of genocide is very clear. And we also reject the idea that it cannot be applied retroactively. The crimes of Nazi Germany were in the 1930s. Yet when the government of Konrad Adenauer, the first chancellor of Germany post the Second World War, when it met really the spirit within which it negotiated the agreement with Israel, were influenced largely by that convention. So it cannot be that it could be done for our brothers, our Jews, our Jewish brothers and sisters, but for us, no, it cannot be done. So we of course also reject the idea that it has to be the delivery of the reparations, once it's agreed on, has to come through a government. We reject that. Evelyn has spoken to that is really patronage. It's an idea that we as black people cannot run our own affairs. Therefore, a government or some big guy has to be found to run affairs for us. And we reject that. And then, of course, the body parts of our people that continues to sit in museums and everywhere else here, those must be returned. We see that as it's an integral part of whatever settlement is to come. Of course, but before, and of course for the German friends, the society, what you could do, you could lobby your government really altogether scrap this joint declaration, because for us, it means nothing. It took place without us. It is of no effect. It is not even what was sanctioned by the Namibian government. So tell your politicians to stop wasting your money. If they pay this money, it is really, it is a waste. And it is not going to change anything. Our children will still continue to hold the horse and ask for what is due to them. We want a clean slate. We want a clean start, because that has nothing to do with us. Of course, as a leadership, we recognize that this is a long-haul journey for us. It's going to be protracted. We want to stay at it for so long as it takes. But as a people, we have started our own self-help programs, and for that, we also call on you to support us, be it education programs, be it micro, small, because as a people, we want to do something for our community while this discussion is going on, and while we are waiting for a serious partner, because currently we don't have that serious partner in the current administration and many others that have gone before, and we are ready to outpace them. I'm finishing. And I think as I finish, there are three specific groups that I think any settlement, any serious settlement would have to speak to in terms of their responsibility and the role. That is in addition to the German government. The first one is the church. The church, particularly in Namibia, were complicit in the crimes. And so any serious settlement must talk to the role of the church and what they must do, because they worked hand in glove with the colonizers, and they were the one delivering our people to concentration camps. The second one is business. The colonial adventures or expedition would not have gone on without business, particularly in Namibia. I know, for instance, that without aid of Luderites, the businessmen that I spoke to, we at least would not have been perhaps colonized at the time, at least not in the days of von Bismarck, who was a reluctant imperialist. So business, and especially big businesses like the Wurmanbroek, who continues to operate in Namibia, I don't know whether they're here, they have a responsibility. And the last one really speaks to the question that is central to our struggle, and that is the question of land. The land we lost, the land that was never returned. That land has luckily not gone anywhere else. That land remains in Namibia as it was in 1884, and that land is in the hands of descendants of settler German and Afrikaner farmers. There is a role for them to play. I think, wearing thin are the days where they could just sit and pretend like they don't know what is going on, claiming that there was no history of looting, whereas they know that the land they sit on really is a loot. And so any settlement must be very clear about the role of some of these groups.
Thank you for making that so clear. Thank you for hardly any problem. Hardly any problem. One proposal I'd like to make, also after having spoken with Uhuru before, is that now we have some 3 questions, or let's say 10 minutes time for question, then have altogether the break. And Boniface, can you just give me a sign whether you're also okay with that? 10 minutes for question? No? No questions? Okay, so we stick for okay, if anyone has a question, please remember it for the panel discussion that we have scheduled at the end. Evelyn, are you still there in the call, or have we lost you? May we invite you then to come back to the panel discussion?
Evelyn is still here.
Perfect. Can you come back to the panel discussion afterwards then? Okay, dann vielen Dank für die Aufmerksamkeit und Sie haben jetzt eine halbe Stunde trotzdem Zeit für Pause. Es gibt einen Büchertisch am Eingang, es gibt einen Büchertisch, 2 Büchertische hier. Bedienen Sie sich an Getränken und Snacks. Und um 12:30 geht es dann weiter. Genau. 18:30 Uhr treffen wir uns wieder. Machen jetzt so langsam weiter. Das heißt, ich würde Sie bitten, wieder Platz zu nehmen. Okay, wunderbar. Dann machen wir jetzt weiter. Und unter dem Titel Namibia nach 32 Jahren Unabhängigkeit, eine zivilgesellschaftliche Bestandsaufnahme, möchte ich Uhuru Dempers vorstellen, der auch, vielen, vielen herzlichen Dank dafür, nach Frankfurt gekommen ist, um heute hier mit uns gemeinsam zu diskutieren. Uhuru Dempers war als Student eine der... do you have the translation or do you need it? Is it okay? Well, I promise that I won't say it well. Ich hoffe, gut. War als Student eine der führenden Personen der Massenproteste gegen das Apartheidsregime in Namibia. Deshalb wurde er auch wegen dieses Protests damals im Windhoek vom Regime verhaftet und das war 1988. Heute ist er eine der bekanntesten Persönlichkeiten der namibischen Zivilgesellschaft. Uhuru ist Mitglied im Nationalen Regierungsrat des Afrika Peer Review Governing Mechanism. Außerdem leitet er das Referat für soziale Verantwortung der evangelisch-lutherischen Kirche in Namibia. Er hat sehr politische, radikale Kampagnen mit geplant, organisiert, durchgeführt, unter anderem zum bedingungslosen Grundeinkommen und koordiniert die Arbeitsgruppe der namibischen Zivilgesellschaft für eine Landreform, also genau das, was Nandi vorher auch gefordert hat. Genau, thank you for coming to Frankfurt, and I give the floor to you. One administrative organisatorial remark. Wir werden jetzt, Uhuru hat nochmal 15 Minuten Zeit für einen Input und danach gehen wir direkt in die Plenardiskussion über, damit alle miteinander ins Gespräch kommen können, inklusive Sie und die Rednerin. So, vielen Dank. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. May I greet you also in a Namibian way. This time of the day, in some areas in Namibia, we say "thankwes." So that's good evening, thankwes. I first got a glimpse of Frankfurt in 1989. I was 17 years old, a schoolboy then. I was passing to the United Kingdom to participate in a 1-month-long campaign against anti-apartheid. Unfortunately, the only thing I remember about Frankfurt that time is the very strong espresso coffee that I had at the airport, which until today I still have difficulty to drink that coffee. I am a descendant of the survivors of genocide, both on my mother and on my father's side. Some of my family, the Rukamba family, which is the surname of my mother before she got married to my father, which is this Dutch surname, Dempers. That family still lives until today in Botswana, and also some of the Nama family also find themselves there. I've been in Germany since the 3rd of September this year. And the main purpose of my coming for 2 months to Germany was to promote people-to-people relationships. The official agreement between Namibia and German government is very important, and we hope that it will one day be finalized. But what I think there are more opportunities in the people-to-people relations and between institutions of people, churches, because I am from a church background and I work for the church, but also sports, culture, the academia, entertainment, many other relationships are possible. I also, this morning I landed from Indonesia, where I was at a meeting of the World Council of Churches, a panel that was looking at some recommendations to the G20 meeting that will take place next month in Bali, in Indonesia. And I met there sisters and brothers from Latin America, from the Caribbean, from Africa, other parts of Africa. And I was just not surprised, but shocked by the extent of the damage that colonialism has caused to many parts of the world. And the consequences of that still being felt until today in many parts of the world. And in my own analysis, unfortunately, this colonial project is continuing in different forms, in the forms of multinational companies which have no respect for the environment, no respect for dignity of people, and is destroying the planet at a very, very fast pace. And therefore, we the people need to get together and fight against this new form of colonialism and imperialism. I have been asked to talk about Namibia after 32 years of independence from a civil society perspective. And although it's very difficult, I will try to do it in the 15 minutes, of which maybe only 10 are left now. I want to title my input as follows, that what has happened in the past, we probably don't have the possibility to change, but the future is in our hands, the destiny is in our hands, and there are opportunities for us to define a better future, not only for those of us that are victims of colonialism, but for the whole world. And it's with that positive insight that I'm making these inputs. So the first question, how is Namibia today? After more than hundreds of years of colonialism, first Germany and then South African, and the 32 years of independent government. Despite Namibia being a very wealthy country, I think per capita, Namibia is probably one of the richest countries in the world. But unfortunately, also the country with so many poor people, where the majority of the poor people still live in poverty. The World Bank, January this year, said 1.6 million of the 2.6 million Namibians were still living in poverty, and some of them in extreme poverty. Unfortunately, many children in Namibia will sleep tonight on an empty stomach. That's the reality of Namibia. The crisis of economic and financial crisis, the drought, the COVID-19 has all just made this situation that was already worse even more terrible. The land, and my brother has talked about this, there's still 4,000 white males that are still owing 70% of productive agricultural land in Namibia, 32 years after independence. Namibia is amongst the top 3 most unequal countries in the world, competing for the first place with countries like Brazil, South Africa, and so on. Youth unemployment is a crisis. We might see the next Arab Spring type of protests coming up in Namibia. The situation compared to pre-independence has changed. I'm not suggesting that nothing has improved in the past 32 years. There is the political freedoms to participate in the process of democracy and so on has changed. I can today stand and criticize our government without the fear of being put in jail. So there's a lot of, also in terms of infrastructure and other things, there is some improvements that has taken place, but compared to the opportunities that we had to give a decent life for many of our people, we have failed them. 42% of our population lives in inhumane housing conditions in the so-called informal settlements or the squatters as they are called. Some of these problems is also a hangover from the colonial period. When we were negotiating our independence under the United Nations, there were 5 Western countries, including the government of West Germany, that forced our leaders that as part of this compromise, they must agree that the private property of the descendants of Germany and other places in Namibia must be protected. So in our constitution, we have entrenched a clause that says the private property of those, for example, the 4,000 white males that owns the land, that land cannot be expropriated from them. And although we have made some legislation to change the situation, this has not been the case. I want to come next and focus on the challenges within the Namibia-German relations. As my brother before said, it was really sad that the most affected communities, especially the Nama and the Herero, had to take many years to convince our own Namibian government that the genocide was a special case and cannot just be treated as part of the general colonial project, that there was significant damage that was done. There's a lot of communities that are still suffering from generational trauma and are still landless and don't have no livelihoods. And therefore, we are still also trying to look at opportunities to deal with this question decisively in Namibia. There has been lost opportunities between Namibia and German relationships. For example, the German parliament in 1989 said Namibia was a special case. It's not normal like many other countries. It's a special case. And we're asking why? Why special case? Why is Nicaragua not special case? Why is, Zambia not special case? Why Namibia? There was no definition, understanding. Why are they saying it's a special case? If German government that time could have said, because of these relations, because of what we have done there and so on, we would have been in a very different place. The Chancellor Helmut Kohl came to Namibia September 1995 to visit Namibia for the first time by a German leader to Namibia. Silence, no talk about genocide, no talk about colonialism, nothing. It's just trade and business and culture and those things, no discussions. If we had discussed already that time, and our traditional leaders and so on were having demonstrations and what have you to say, you need to apologize, sir, for what you have done in Namibia. Development cooperation between the two countries. Germany says it gives most of its development aid to Namibia, but this development aid also does not take into account the particular difficult situations of those communities that are affected by the genocide and land dispossession that Germany has caused in Namibia. So it's development aid for everyone, but there's no particular. For example, the German government said our money for development cooperation will not be used to buy land from those that own land and to give to those that has been dispossessed. They said, no, our money must not be used for that. Why? Because this land has been dispossessed from the indigenous population under German colonial rule, and these people have gained these privileges as a result. We also had the apology that one of your ministers of development cooperation made in 2004. When we were celebrating 100 years of the genocide, and when she came back to Namibia, the German government said, no, that was personal apology. It was not us. We don't know you. You were talking on your own behalf. That was another lost opportunity where German government could have taken that discussion forward and say, okay, let's now see what would be the modalities of taking this forward. Also, there's not been a remembrance culture promoted both in Namibia and Germany. We could have, and we are very pleased by some of the things that are happening now in both our countries to decolonize. There is a small town called Swakopmund in Namibia. It's called a little German town because a lot of the descendants of Germany are staying in this town. And if there's one place on this earth that needs to be decolonized, it's Swakopmund. Because when you go there, you will think you are in somewhere, some small city in Germany. So the decolonialization is not only a German project, but also we as Namibians need to deal with that. Concluding, I want to quickly give my views on the joint declaration between Namibia and Germany, and then just close with some suggestions for the way forward. I must say that what the joint declaration has come up with is not satisfactory. Again, is another lost opportunity. However, when we look at where we were before this negotiation started, when there was denial from German government, when there was even reluctance by our own government to recognize this, when you look at from where we are coming from, it is an achievement that we have reached this stage. I don't agree that that whole agreement and that whole process must be torn out and put in a rubbish bin. We must use that process to look at what are the weaknesses within this process. How do we get the communities that have been excluded from this negotiation, how do we get them back on the table? Because I, for one, think that we don't have the luxury of time. We don't have another 10 years, 20 years to restart from scratch another negotiation, because the situation in the country is getting worse. Economic crisis and all that. And these are my views. Namibians, and I'm talking about government, I'm talking about the affected communities, I'm talking about Namibian citizens in general, needs to work on unity amongst themselves. There is a lot of tensions and lack of unity, tensions between government and affected communities, tensions within the affected communities and so on. And therefore, if the Namibian communities are not united and doesn't form a powerful force to confront the mighty Germany, we are not going to achieve our goal as a country. I mean, if you look at other countries that have successfully negotiated this kind of deals with Germany, like the government of Israel, there was that unity government and the people working together and confronting that. I want to also say that, and this is my concluding point, whereas this agreement is very, very important, and we hope and pray that it gets finalized as soon as possible, we as the people, Namibians and German citizens, need to look at opportunities for more collaboration, exchanges, so that we can talk to each other. I mean, just coming today to this meeting, I have made 2 contacts, one with a German community, a town, Mainhem, that is having some artifacts and so on of a Nama community, Bondelswarts community in Namibia. I've talked to someone that wrote a book about the church relations and so on. And the past month that I've been in Germany, I have on a daily basis encountered new initiatives that gives the hope that we as the people can establish more of this collaboration. We also, I participated, for example, last 2 weeks ago in Freiburg in an exchange between Freiburg University of Education and Namibian University of Namibia, where they were looking at, in terms of school curriculum and university curriculum, how do we teach reconciliation and the genocide and the colonial history in history books here in Namibia and in Germany. And I want to conclude by saying that we really appreciate your coming here tonight. I think many of you, and maybe all of you here, your families did not participate directly into the atrocities that has been committed by the German forces in Namibia and other places. But as citizens, you feel the responsibility to work with us to make things right and to help us with the difficulties that we are facing going forward. And I think we have an opportunity to establish and build on special relations so that we can create a better future jointly, and also deal with the crisis that these new forms of colonialism through the multinational companies and through private interest and greed is really destroying our planet and creating an exclusive society where only a few people live a wealthy life and the majority of citizens in the world are in misery. So a better future is possible. Let's work together and achieve that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Uhuru, for also bringing this talk, or the criticism and the political actions that are needed to this room, and to focus also on the relationships that can bring them to the fore. I'd like to welcome you and Nandi and Boniface to the plenary discussion. Please hand the moderation over to Boniface and ask Johannes whether Evelyn and Heike are in the Zoom room. They aren't. Okay, so we try to get them back in the main time. Dann versuchen wir das jetzt zurückzubekommen.
You have the headset.
Yeah, my headset.
Comrade, you have a headset? Oh. So. Guten Abend auch von meiner Seite. Wir haben beschlossen,
das Programm ein bisschen anzupassen. Und zwar wollen wir direkt in die letzte Runde gehen. Und wir hoffen, dass wir die beiden, die online sind, wieder zurückkriegen. Und die Idee dabei ist, dass ich auf meine persönlichen Fragen verzichte, damit Sie die Gelegenheit bekommen, in Austausch zu kommen mit den beiden hier, aber auch mit den beiden Damen online. There's no translation? How comes there's no translation? Is it the same here in the room? Okay. Funktioniert das jetzt? Is it working? Does it work now? Does it work now? Not at all. Okay, let's try it again. Okay. Manchmal ist das so mit... So, ich würde sagen, wir arbeiten noch dran, die beiden zurückzuholen. Aber jetzt haben Sie die Gelegenheit, wenn Sie Fragen haben, Kommentare zu dem, was Sie gehört haben. Ich sehe schon, das gehen 2 Hände hoch. Vincent oder ein anderer, wenn du mit dem Mikrofon. Wir beginnen hier. Hier vorne. Und dann da, direkt dahinter.
Hallo, ich bin Maria Ebobisse und ich hätte eine Frage an den, ich bin ein bisschen später gekommen, deswegen habe ich den Namen jetzt leider nicht mehr mitgekommen, an den...
Uru Nandi.
Genau, zum Thema zu dem, was er gerade als letztes berichtete, nämlich, dass er sagte, dass nach der sogenannten Unabhängigkeit in den 60er Jahren die Kolonialmächte die namibische Regierung dazu gezwungen haben, in der Verfassung zu verankern, dass der Boden, der deutsch kolonisierte Boden, also nicht der Bevölkerung, also sozusagen nicht enteignet wird, sondern der Bevölkerung weiter vorenthalten wird. Das heißt, der Boden bleibt für die Kolonialherren erhalten. Meine Frage ist, was würde denn kam denn jemals die Regierung darauf, zu sagen, so, das war mal so, aber wir widersetzen uns dem. Ich meine, der Zwang, der damals ausgeübt wurde, ist indirekt sicher immer noch vorhanden. Aber meine Frage ist, könnte sich die Regierung dem widersetzen und könnte sagen, nein, dieser Boden, der kolonisierte Boden, gehört dem Land, dem namibischen Volk, wie auch immer, und nicht mehr den Kolonialherren. Und damit wäre ja auch schon eine Grundlage geschaffen, um zu verteilen.
Vielen Dank. Direkt dahinter, wir sammeln zunächst 3 bis 4 Fragen, dann können Sie gebündelt antworten.
Ja. Meine Frage geht auch um die weißen Namibier, denen das Land gehört, aber in eine andere Richtung. Wie nehmen diese Menschen denn, Sie haben gesprochen, das sind 4000, wie ist deren Rolle in der Zivilgesellschaft? Nehmen die teil an der Zivilgesellschaft und wie ist denn der Diskurs mit den Herero und Nama? Gibt es den überhaupt? Und wie läuft der? Das ist meine Frage.
Vielen Dank. Direkt noch, ja, eine dritte Frage, auch hier vorne.
Hi, I prefer to speak in English.
Yes, please.
As one can say, I'm from Namibia. I'm from the northern part of Namibia. My name is Ndati. I was born during wartime, and so coming to Namibia as an independent country, during school time, we get to learn about what happened to one of our people, one of the tribes. And after so long time, of course, the two governments, Germany and Namibia, after it has started, they try to speak about it, how they can do it, yeah? But my main question is actually not even a question, I would say it's more of a comment. I'm a person of my own, and growing up as a child, growing up in a democratic country, and still knowing that we just came out of war, and the most affected people were those ones, the Hereros and the Namas. And let us not forget, for me, the truth, according to what we know, is not just the Hereros and the Namas, but also the Khoisans and the Khoikhoi. Those are the Bushmen also. The ones the Germans called Hottentots. How did this word even come to the German part, Hottentot? It's because it was also part of it. So, my question is actually not a question, but it's also a question in the way. My country's government is more dominant by people of my tribe. But for me, to tell the truth, I would say, as a German government, and all of you, the Germans, you did not colonize our government. You did not kill our governments. You killed the Hereros, the Namas, and the Hottentots. It's for you to talk to them and make sure that this whole issue is made with them, because you did not come to the Namibian government. Don't forget that the Namibian government is under us, the Ovambo people. We are the majority, and we are the ruling party. We are the one making it, but we were not the one being killed by you. Our people were being killed by the Netherlands, the ones we called the Afrikaner, the Boers. Yes, but the government is running. So this whole talk of Germany talking to the Namibian government, I'm sorry for maybe making everything sour, but it is the truth and it's the fact. You people need to talk, not to the German government because you didn't, to the Namibian government because you didn't kill the Namibian government. Who's sitting the Namibian government is us, the Ovambo people. But it's not about us. Of course, we want the government will try to make money out of it. You people, if you want to do good, do it the right way, please. You did these people wrong, so it's for you to do these people right. And not the government.
Thank you very much, Sisi.
It's the truth, it's the fact. Don't make mistake twice and 3 times. Don't do that. Of course, they are benefiting, but you are benefiting the wrong people. Go to the right route and help the right people. Do good with the right people. The Namas, the Hereros, and the Khoisans, Khoikhoi people. The Bushmen, the Hottentots, as you guys call it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ja.
So, jetzt würde ich gerne die beiden auch wieder begrüßen, die online da sind. Das heißt, in der zweiten Fragerunde bitte ich Sie auch zu berücksichtigen, dass Heiko Becker und Evelyn auch online sind. Und wir haben das Ganze jetzt so strukturiert, dass wir diesen Austausch machen. Aber die Idee der Podiumsdiskussion war, darüber nachzudenken, wie Auswege aus der aktuellen Krise aussehen können. Und ich bitte schon Uhuru, Nandi, Heiko und Evelyn, sich zu überlegen, was in dieser Abschlussrunde, ich werde euch die Gelegenheit dazu geben, was aus eurer Perspektive der Ausweg aus der aktuellen Krise sein könnte. Aber jetzt, now I want to give you the opportunity to react to the first questions and to the comment we have heard just now. Maybe we'll start with Comrade Uhuru.
Should I use the mic or just?
Yes, it's better. Otherwise, the translator won't understand you.
Okay.
I will start with the land issue. Immediately after independence in '91, we had a national land conference and agreed on resolutions about how to resolve the issue. It was such a critical issue that we did it 1 year after independence. We decided that we were not going to just grab the land, that Parliament will make the law, and through that legal process, the land will be expropriated from those that own, and there will be compensation paid. That's what the law said. The law did not say the compensation must be on market price. It just said it must be just compensation. Unfortunately, our government did not do this. There was a law passed. It said even in our constitution, there is a clause for expropriation of land in the public interest, in the interest of the nation. But our government maybe only expropriated 3 farms in the past 32 years. There was a court case where some of the families took government to court, but the government was just asked to go back and to revise the law. It took government 10 years to revise, just to make regulations so that the law can be more stronger. So there is certainly no political will on the side of government to work aggressively. Also, the price of land, government has been compensating on market price. So if like Russian billionaires and Mexican billionaires come and buy the land, then the prices gets very high, and then government cannot afford to buy more land. Also, when the land is bought, government is not giving first priority to those affected communities. It just opened up for every Namibian who want land. You apply for resettlement and you will get the land. There is no policy to say we will start with the ones that lost most of the land, and this program has been very slow. The most difficult obstacle in the Namibia-German relations that will make the reconciliation even one day impossible is the descendants of Germany, most of them that remained in Namibia. Most of this community deny that there was no genocide. Most of this community think that what Germany has done in Namibia is great, and they don't accept. Majority of them, I'm not saying all of them, majority of them, they even defend. They even, on social media and so on, they will defend Hitler and all those kind of things and make very derogatory remarks about fellow Namibians. And also, how they treat fellow Namibians until today. Some of them, it's like they don't regard them, especially on the farms where they are working. Some of them don't regard black farm workers as human beings the way they treat them. So it's a very difficult, but this is a Namibian problem that we as Namibians have to deal with, because we consider these people as Namibian citizens, although sometimes they feel they are half German citizen and half Namibian citizen. We accept them as fully Namibian citizens, but their behavior is not even like you people here in Germany. Their behavior is like the old Schutztruppe that came some time ago in Namibia. So this is going to be an obstacle, and I think Namibian government, the churches, affected communities, leaders from them needs to create more platforms where we sit and dialogue as Namibians and discuss these difficult questions. There's no way else to do that. We just have to meet and discuss and try to reach a common platform in terms of the way forward.
Andy? I think it's already on.
Yes, just to build on what my brother here have said, and I'm really glad that the discussion is opening up, and I really want to salute the madam who have spoken as an Ovambo lady, and I think you have really done justice to what I want to say. Uhuru have spoken to specifically in respect of the land question, that yes, there's been a process, but the process really has not taken us anywhere. And so the question that we need to ask is, why are we still with that process? And it goes back to what she have said, that the very people who lost land are not the ones who are in government. So there is no will to really deal with this issue. It is not their business. Because when there was an issue that really had the potential to disrupt the country almost to the same level as the land issue, the issue of ex-combatants, those men and women who fought in the Angolan Swapo War, they demanded things, and money was suddenly found because they are from the governing group. So because land that was lost is Herero and Nama land, largely, there is no will to deal with it. So we are dragging feet, basically. So I'm glad that she has brought that truth to the discussion, to say things are not moving because those who hold the levers of power don't really care. And in fact, they benefit from the stagnation. Because when the land is availed, you know, as slow as it is, land is availed, the government takes it when they do take it, and then it goes to the political elite, who mostly happens to be the people that she spoke to and that, you know, that she, I mean, that she said she comes from. So those are really that's the crux of the matter, you know? So these are issues that relegated to the periphery of the political discourse. They are only talked about maybe, you know, when it's elections, and it's nice to talk about them. Otherwise, they are not important to the political leadership. So that is the first point. The other also that I thought I must respond to, my brother spoke to when he was addressing the issue of the joint declaration. He said that maybe this is an opportunity that we shouldn't forgo the joint declaration. You see, our view is that the struggle for restorative justice is one that was guided across many generations by our people, and it was handed down to us as with the right of inheritance, but also with the responsibility to make sure that what we do today would really and genuinely close off this chapter. We are not in for shortcuts. You know, and this is why my sister Evelyn spoke to, we are not in for gimmicks. You know, we in as much as we would want to conclude this business yesterday, because it is our people who are reeling under the legacy of land dispossession and displacement and all of these things. We know that. But we don't want to enter into an agreement that solves nothing and Germany then closes off, because Germany, in fact, as in our view, the sole author of the joint declaration, it says that explicitly that once you enter into this thing, it's the end of it. They are saying this is the end of all claims in terms of all those crimes that they have committed. So why would we, as a people, and unless we want to enter into political expediency arrangements and not principled politics, why would we sign up to such a thing? You know? So I fundamentally agree, and as Ovaherero and Nama traditional leaders, we fundamentally agree with the position that we must take what is on offer, because we are desperate, yes, as we are, or we have needs. Yes, we know we have the needs, but we are not prepared to be rounded up and just to be told to sign things that are not what we ask for, because anyway, the joint agreement was supposed to be a response to the parliamentary motion which was tabled in our parliament. And it does not talk about it does not talk about development aid. Development aid has nothing to do with us. It is a discussion that goes on between all kinds of governments.
I think we will come back to that.
Yes.
Because we have to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We want to also bring into the picture Evelyn.
Okay.
She wanted, I think, to make a comment on the land issue, and after that, we will also give the opportunity to Heike Becker if she has something to say to this topic. We are basically discussing the land issue, this first round, and after that, we'll continue with the other questions. Evelyn.
Okay, thank you, the director of the proceedings. You know, one should remind the House that the tension which arose, which led to this genocide, was from the land dispossession, which led to the Herero and Nama resistance in 1994 and subsequent genocide. And it should also be noted that the Germans gave small reserves totaling about 1 million hectares to natives. The process of dispossession, there was a part of the process of dispossession. By 1913, 1,331 farms were in private possession, of which 180 were on lease and 193 dormant. I also want to highlight the fact that as much as the colonization is over, the Germans went back home and all that, and maybe the 30% of the Germans are still in Namibia. 70% of the economy of Namibia is still in the hands of the Germans. And the Hereros and the Namas are dispossessed of their land. It's still in the hands of the Germans, it's still in the hands of the colonizers. And therefore, we will not rest until our land is in our hands. If I can give you a scenario, it's just that it's not the topic of today, of how the Hereros and the Namas in different countries are living. You will cry tears. And if you go to the places where are predominantly Hereros and Namas in Namibia, you look at the barren land that they've been given. You check the land, the original land which was owned by us, which is in the hands of foreigners in Namibia. You'll cry tears. So until such time, you know, land is life. So you cannot, if you strip someone his or her own land, you have taken life from that person. Until such time that Germany gives us the land, I think these negotiations, whether you call them reconciliation or whatever, it cannot be accepted that they are doing that. They expect us to just lie down and accept everything. I will stop there, but the heritage, someone asked about the heritage, the heritage of genocide. There are so many things that happen. I'll give an example. Most of us cannot even speak the language. Most of us do not understand our culture because it was taken away from us. The heritage that we have, the Hereros are living in the most poor conditions ever. We see young people leaving Namibia because they're economically excluded in Namibia, living and going to other countries and living under appalling conditions. Let me not continue, but stop here and say, you take land from someone, you're taking life from the person. And I think this discussion, this genocide fight, or this struggle will not end until Germany has sat down with us on the table. And Germany has given us what we deserve as the Namas and the Hereros. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. So, unser Techniker, wenn vielleicht die Kamera wieder auf Heike Becker gehen kann. Heike, hast du, ich weiß nicht, ob du die Fragen auch mitbekommen hast, aber die Diskussion, die gerade geführt wird, dreht sich um die Landfrage. Und hast du einen Kommentar zu dieser ersten Einheit, Landfrage, Landrestitution, was auch in deinem Vortrag ein Thema war?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, yes, if you have a comment.
Oh, okay. Obviously, I mean, I know that the land issue has been a big issue. In fact, I was at this first land conference that happened 1 year after independence that Uhuru was speaking about. Of course, there are clear arguments that the social injustice, which is still happening in Namibia today, is very much related to the land issue. I'm personally not so sure whether this is really a matter that is only relevant for certain communities. I know from research and advocacy work that I was involved in some time ago in northern Namibia that there are also big issues there about social justice and injustice and land distribution. I don't know that obviously the land policy is a big issue and people are still working on that. I mean, I'm not really very well qualified to comment on that. All that I know, for instance, from a Namibian colleague who at one stage was even my student, Dr. Romy Tivelekwa, who's working very much on the matter of communal land rights in Namibia, that it's not only a matter of the southern parts, but also something that affects people in other parts of the country. I hope that helps. From my side, I'm not really qualified to comment too closely on that.
Okay, vielen Dank für diesen Kommentar. Und ich glaube, das gibt uns auch die Gelegenheit, wieder Nandi, to bring Nandi again into discussion, because Heike says she can't conclude on that topic, and you made a sign that you wanted to say something else also. Oh.
Yeah, no, basically, just for me, really, the last comment on that one is that I think in Namibia, on many of these issues that we are speaking to, there are actually two opportunistic elements that have come together in a big way. You see, those who hold political power, as she said, have no interest in resolving the matter. Those who hold economic might, who has the land, of course they wouldn't want to relinquish it, and so these are the people that Germany basically is also protecting. The reason why they are dancing over these issues is because Germany is protecting its children. So you have a government in Windhoek that really does not live close to these issues. So, and they can take whatever Germany gives, and then you have a German government that only wants to be seen as doing something about an issue that it really does not want to do anything about, because it wants to entrench those privileges, those benefits of its children who still lives off the loot. Those are the two things that have come together in a big way in Namibia, and so for so long as that remains, I think we are in for a rough ride, those of us who want these issues resolved, because Germany is only going to pretend to be moving when it is not moving, and I have spoken to this earlier, that Germany is not a serious partner, because the first movement is to recognize that what you have done is a crime and really move into doing something about it, not to dance around the concept. And we know where they are dancing around the concept. So those are the two opportunistic elements that have come together, and they are inhibiting any progress in the process. So I just wanted to say that.
Danke.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ich öffne noch für eine zweite Runde von Fragen, Kommentaren von Ihrer Seite. Danach werden alle antworten, und wie es weitergeht, ist so, dass wir uns dann einen Kurzfilm anschauen, was auch aus Namibia kommt. Ich habe ihn in Windhoek gesehen, vor ein paar Monaten. Adressiert genau auch diese Frage von Kolonialismus, Rassismus, was das aus Namibia gemacht hat, in einer sehr kreativen Art. Ich sage nicht mehr viel dazu. Und dann werden wir die Gelegenheit geben an jemanden. Wir hatten im Vorfeld der Konferenz eine Kollegin aus Benin gebeten, die mit uns arbeitet, aus ihrer Perspektive zu kommentieren, was dieser Prozess mit Namibia für andere afrikanische Länder bedeuten könnte, die mit Verhandlungen mit Frankreich, Belgien, Spanien gar nicht begonnen haben. Diese Kollegin ist krank, aber ihr Mitarbeiter ist hier im Raum. Wir werden ihm auch die Gelegenheit geben, das zu diesen kurzen Kommentar einzubringen. Jetzt habe ich von dieser Seite Sie und direkt dahinter.
Yeah, I want to thank Comrade Dempers for his remarks to remind us Germans about two lost opportunities, 1995 when Kohl visited Namibia and 2004 when Vitorek Zoll made this famous Schuldbekenntnis at Okakarara. Two opportunities we lost as the Germans to get involved in reparations. And I was just thinking whether it's not time for us Germans now to react, even in this circle, to do something. Die Koalitionsregierung ist jetzt ja ein Jahr schon an der Macht und in dem Koalitionsvertrag war etwas vorhanden von dieser Weiterführung von dem sogenannten Versöhnungsabkommen, das ja jetzt auch schon wieder 1,5 Jahre zurück ist. Und es ist nicht Zeit, dass wir jetzt unsere Regierung unter Druck setzen und auch unsere Kirchen. Sie haben, Masengo, haben mehrmals die Kirchen auch genannt, dass wir auch die Kirchen unter Druck setzen, an der Stelle weiterzuarbeiten. Und diese Chance, die ja im letzten Mai wenigstens da war, die jetzt wieder aufzugreifen und weiterzuführen. Also konkret, dass diese Konferenz oder diese Veranstaltung damit endet, auch eine öffentliche Erklärung abzugeben an diese Zielgruppen, die uns hier in Deutschland betreffen, nämlich unsere Regierung und unsere Kirchen, an dieser Stelle der Versöhnung wieder ins Gespräch zu kommen und das weiterzuführen, mit welchem Ziel auch immer, aber jedenfalls da weiterzumachen, was im letzten Mai so hoffnungsvoll erschien, als wir gedacht haben, auf einmal haben wieder alle über Namibia geredet. Das ist ja spätestens seit Februar dieses Jahres wieder total vom Tisch und es ist nicht nötig, dass wir uns da zu Wort melden.
Vielen Dank. Bevor Sie das Wort ergreifen, würde ich, weil das auch ein konkreter Vorschlag ist, ich das kurz kommentieren. Ich gehe ein bisschen raus aus meiner Rolle als Moderator, um eine andere Rolle anzunehmen. Was Sie sagen, ist von zentraler Bedeutung, weil unsere Regierung dabei ist, genau die Brechstange-Strategie zu fahren. Bevor wir diese Konferenz hier gemacht haben, war Nandi jede Woche in den Medien in Namibia, weil es konkrete Pläne gibt, dass eine deutsche Delegation nach Namibia geht, um den Vertrag zu unterzeichnen. Das heißt, diese Idee einer Weiterführung, dass das vielleicht als Step zu nehmen, um weiter zu denken, die ist nicht da. Und das ist umso bedauerlicher, als ich heute bei einer Konferenz war in Berlin, bevor ich hierhin kam. Und dort war Frau Vitorek Zoll. Sie hat ihren Vortrag, sie war unmittelbar nach mir dran, sie hatte mit diesem Konflikt angefangen. Und sie hat zum Ausdruck gebracht, sie unzufrieden sie ist mit der Art und Weise, wie dieses Thema behandelt wird. Das heißt, es gibt ein Window of Opportunity, wenn wir uns gut koordinieren mit einer Vorbereitungsteam dieser Konferenz, haben wir schon darüber nachgedacht, was wir tun könnten im Anschluss an diese Konferenz und an der Speakers Tour, die Nandi macht in Aachen und in Berlin, um am Thema dran zu bleiben. Und gerne würden wir in Kontakt mit Ihnen, aber auch mit vielen anderen bleiben, die uns dabei unterstützen können, diese Idee einer Resolution vielleicht zu konkretisieren, um auch Richtung Öffentlichkeit eine Botschaft auszusenden. So, jetzt sind Sie dran.
Okay, meine Frage geht an Uhuru. Sie sprachen von dem modernen Kolonialismus. Meine Frage ist, würden Sie, da waren ja Gespräche vor einiger Zeit zwischen der deutschen und namibischen Regierung bezüglich Wasserstoffproduktion und Solaranlagen in den Diamantengebieten. Würden Sie das auch modernen Kolonialismus nennen oder nicht? Was halten Sie von dieser Idee und wissen Sie, ob da irgendwas am Laufen ist, Aktuelles? Danke.
So, und dritte Wortmeldung, Zerai und dann hier vorne und dann da.
Meine Frage wäre noch aus der deutschen Perspektive. Im Gegensatz zu der Zeit der Kolonialzeit hat sich ja diese Gesellschaft auch mittlerweile ist ja viel diverser geworden. Es gibt also auch eine zahlreiche Diaspora aus Afrika, die Teil hier des Gemeinwesens hier in Frankfurt sind oder Rhein-Main-Gebiet. Unter denen sind auch einige hier. Und bei der Frage, die der Kollege Bonifaz gestellt hatte, wäre ja, was könnten Wege sein aus der Krise? Und im Rahmen dessen wäre meine Frage, was könnten wir als Diaspora für einen Beitrag leisten, die auch ein Teil dieser Gesellschaft sind, die auch politische Auswirkungen anschieben können, soziale, um diesen Push, dass sozusagen es ein Neustart dieses Abkommens kommt, weil auf die Ebene, wie es geschehen ist, scheint es ja eher zur Spaltung zu führen. Und deswegen wäre meine ganz konkrete Frage, an welcher Stelle könnten wir, Diaspora aus Afrika, egal aus welcher Region, dazu beitragen, dass eben unsere Brüder und Schwestern, Ovaherero und Nama, zu ihrem Recht verholfen wird. Das wäre meine konkrete Frage. Danke.
Vielen Dank. Hier vorne.
Hi. Okay, I'd like to start with a comment first, and then I have two questions, and I'd like to address them to whoever wants to answer. My first comment goes to someone who has made a comment before, referring to the land belonging to Germans. I think language shapes thoughts, and it's very important that we choose our words very wisely. So when you say land that belongs to Germans, you have to readjust the choice of words and rather talk about occupied land. Because just because the land was stolen 200 years ago and passed on to the descendants of colonizers, you cannot say the land belongs to Germans. And I think it was a gentleman in the background who has made that comment. He said, das Land, das den Deutschen gehört, which is not true, which needs a readjustment. And I mean, if you compare it to, let's say, a thief who has stolen a car 200 years ago, just because he has passed on that car to his descendants does not mean that the descendants really own the car today. Ownership is something else than occupying something. So I really urge for a very careful choice of words. And then I'm a little, but that could be depending on how educated you are on that stage. If you ask the question of expropriation of land, it's very difficult if you don't know anything about African countries. You can take, for example, Zimbabwe, who has tried the same thing with British colonizers who have still occupied land, and Mugabe has done the same thing, and he has expropriated the land from those British colonizers and has given it to Zimbabweans. And for that, Zimbabwe had to face lawsuits because the British colonizers expect that land back, or at least a a compensation for being taken away this land. So that's another thing, asking whether this is possible or not. African countries are really in a position where they are not able to act freely, okay? You have to be aware of that. Yeah, I know. So, and I'm referring to you. With that being said, I would like to move on to my questions.
Yes, please.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Earlier we heard about uneven distribution of power within the negotiations. And I think it was the professor in South Africa who has, suggested that the parties, the affected parties have to come together, and she made an example that Black people and Sinti and Roma have come together in Germany to form an alliance and to be heard and make their demands. And that's my first question. Is there any alliance between Namibians or Namibian affected people with other African countries that have been former colonizers or have been suffering the same history? So, are you trying to handle the host situation only within Namibians, among Namibians, or are there any alliances between African countries who have suffered? Because I think the voices would be much louder if African countries really came together instead of trying to negotiate on national level rather than on continental level. That's one question. Can I ask the second question too?
If it's a short one.
Yeah, it is. I think so. I hope so. The lady from Namibia, she just explained that in Africa, and I think this is something that is in every African country, we have heterogeneous people coming together. It's not like in Germany where the people are basically homogeneous. So it doesn't matter where Merkel is coming from or where Scholz is coming from, they're all considered Germans. Whereas in Africa, you cannot go by the same system and expect people to respect the person in charge just as much as they are being respected here, because it's a very heterogeneous, those are very heterogeneous nations, or tribes, as some might call them. So is there maybe a discussion or a discourse where the concept of nation is being rethought in Africa in a way that maybe some call it tribalism, but in a way that the concept of nation just has to be reorganized? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ich bin als Organisationsteam dieser Konferenz, haben wir uns zusammengeschlossen und nachgedacht, wie das weitergeht, und wir sind so froh, das geöffnet zu haben. Es kommen so viele schöne, bereichernde Beiträge von Ihnen, von euch allen. Das bringt uns ein bisschen auch weiter in unseren eigenen Überlegungen. Jetzt wollen wir zunächst die nehmen, die im virtuellen Raum sind. Evelyn hat sich gemeldet, und bei den Fragen, die wir haben, gibt es auch bestimmt eine Frage, die Heike Becker vielleicht gerne nehmen will. Und dann werden wir hier zurückkommen, damit jede von euch, Nandi und Uhuru, auch die eine oder die andere Frage oder den einen oder den anderen Kommentar nimmt. Zunächst Evelyn. The floor is yours. Evelyn, are you still with us?
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Hello. Oh, okay. I will try to answer some of the questions that I had. Maybe I should start with the question that lady asked about as to whether the concept of a nation being reorganized, are we ready for that? As Africans, we have lost so much, and the only person that we have is ourselves. As tribes, inverted commas, I hate the word tribe, but as a nation, as a tribe, that's the only person we have. Now, if we are going to reorganize ourselves according to some Western concept, we will lose even the little that we have because we've lost so much. For now, we are not yet ready to lose the fact that we are hereros. We have the traditional leader who can speak on our behalf, who we give the mandate to, and the leader is able to speak on our behalf, and understanding our cultures, understanding who we really are. Being a cultural being is very important. Now, if we are going to reorganize ourselves, we are going to be confused a nation. That's one. She also asked about the alliance, whether the alliance is in place in terms of us having other African countries working with us on this struggle. The fact of the matter is that the answer is no. But we are, for the mere fact that we are moving around, we are participating in conferences like this. In fact, it is to urge and to ask or to mobilize the other countries, to mobilize people to join us and help us with this struggle that we are facing. And about the churches, going to the churches, I have reservations with churches. We are where we are today in Africa because the West brought the church to us and took our land. They brought the church to us and killed us. And even right now, Pollens, or Mr. Pollens, is talking about, they are no longer going to talk about or sit and negotiate, but they are now going to ask the churches to talk to us so that we can forgive them, and trying to use the Bible again to come to make us keep quiet about our land. If churches come, they should come as progressive churches. But if they're going to come and try to use the strategy they used when they colonized us, we are not ready for the churches to get into this. And the other question was about what is it that the German community can do to pressurize the government or the federal government of Germany to listen. We can use every voice, we can use every corner for this struggle to come to its conclusion. We will appreciate if civil society can organize itself on our behalf so that this can be done. We are pushing for solidarity networks. One of our objectives is that African Union will be approached, or African Union should start listening to us and listening to this struggle. We will appreciate if in your power, in your small corners, or wherever you are, and if you have powers, the academics, if they can push and force United Nations to listen to us, African Union to listen to us, this will be highly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Heike?
Yes, thank you. I just want to make a few brief comments on the question of alliances that maybe sounding a bit hopeful in a way. I mentioned during my initial input this afternoon that when the so-called reconciliation agreement was presented last year, there was a protest which included some of the activists like and some of the people who've been campaigning in support of the Ovaherero and Nama struggles for many years, but also young German activists, some of them black German, some of them not of a black background, coming together and also protesting against that. I think that's on the German side. I also know that in Namibia there are also activists who have been, for instance, campaigning on certain issues such as changing the public spaces, like the removal of the Côte François statue in Windhoek and others. And who call themselves decolonial activists. And many of them are also from other cultural, or if you like, ethnic backgrounds than being Ovaherero and Nama, but they're still also in solidarity with these demands. And I remember one of them once saying, when people were asking him, why are you as an Ovambo supporting the struggle for the reparations for the genocide of Ovaherero and Nama, and he said, of course I'm doing that because these are my fellow Namibians, these are my fellow Africans, and in the end these are my fellow human beings, and this is a matter for all of us as human beings. So there have been kind of alliances, there have been also some get-togethers of people from different former German colonies, like Cameroon, Tanzania, with some Namibians. So there have been some of this happening. I think an area, an arena where much of that is happening is actually in the field of arts. Many of them are artists, both performing artists, but also visual artists. So there have been quite a few things happening in that field. And again, those who contribute to this transnational get-togethers to demand justice for the colonial violence, for the colonial injustice. Those who come from Namibia are not necessarily all of them from a background of being Ovaherero and Nama, but from all kinds of different backgrounds. And I find that's actually quite hopeful and positive. Of course, governments always do a different thing and need to be pressurized, and a lot of pressure needs to be put on them. But there are some kind of alliances, I think, happening both in Namibia, in Germany, and also across different nations, from what I've been observing and also from my different sets of research that I've been doing.
Thank you very much, Heike. Now back in the room here.
Yeah, I think just to add to what the speakers have said, what the other speakers have said, truly the idea of an alliance, it's a commendable one. I mean, it's something that we recognize its importance. And just like what my sister Evelyn said, we had to start with ourselves. The fact that I'm sitting here able to speak for my Nama counterpart, we had to start with ourselves. And what we did first as Ovaherero and Nama people, we came together and we set up joint structures because we believe that that united front is important. So as two people, we came together. Our leaders are working, hand in glove, at the Herero. Even when we took, when we took the German government to courts in America, it was the two groups that were together. And so perhaps the alliance building front is one where we have not really paid much attention to because we were busy with litigation and forcing the Germans to even begin this sham process that they have really engaged in, because for a very long time they refused even to do anything, to even talk to us. And after we went to the US courts, the two groups, the Namas and the Hereros, when they were exposed and it became a conversation, that is when they came. And when they came, even then they are not genuine, so they got involved in that. So we have started small with alliances building. We have started with the two groups coming together. Now in all the structures where we are engaged on this matter, there is a Herero group and a Nama group. Of course, we have contacts outside Africa as well. Especially here, mostly there are a lot who are working with us on this course, the minority rights group, the Society for Threatened People, Post-Colonial, and all these groups. They are really helping us. And we have contacts also in the Caribbean and many other places. So because of now having been really too engaged in litigation and many other things, maybe we are still small on the front of building alliances. But yes, we recognize that it is an important pillar of our struggle going forward. On the issue of that has to do with tribes and so forth, the heterogeneity of our societies. you know, that's a serious one, and I recognize the issues that you have raised. And really, it sits at the heart of many of these issues, you know, because when Europeans came to Africa, they drew up these borders without any regard to really what essentially were nation states. And the elite actually started just dismissing us as tribes and ethnical groups. We were nation states. In Southwest Africa, I have spoken a lot to Ovaherero land and Great Namakwa land. These were sovereign countries, because even when Germany came there and they wanted to sign protection treaties, they were signing treaties with countries that were self-governing. Yes, yeah, and so there were many others, you know, in the north there was the Ovambo land and all these things, yeah. So these were nation states that Germany came to destroy, and they now dismissing it as tribes. Even when you say you come from a traditional authority, they want to say it's just a tribe. These were nation states that spoke for themselves, and that's why we have, for instance, you would have a government that is led by people who don't necessarily come from your group, and so your issues are not important to them. Those are the challenges that are there. Yeah? Okay. I think I would just end there.
Thank you. Comrade Ururu.
Yes, thank you. I want to start by just putting the record straight. My brother Nandi, I did not say we must sign this joint declaration as is. Please. When I started, I said the joint declaration is not satisfactory. I said our Namibian government and the affected communities must get together. We need unity. At the moment, we are very much divided on this issue as Namibians. And that's a topic for us back home as Namibians. I don't want to confuse our German audience with those difficulties. So I said, let's not start from the scratch. Let's build on what the framework of what has been agreed and bring on board the concerns that the affected communities are having around the language, around the understanding of genocide, around the amount for the reparations, around the issues of the diaspora that are excluded from this agreement. So I said, let's bring those that are excluded on board, and I called for a compromise on this issue. I don't think we can expect to go to the negotiation table and have it all our way. That's not the reality of life nowadays. We give some, we win some, we lose some, and that's just what it is. That's how the politics of reality is. But I don't want you to go back to Namibia to say Uhuru is supporting the joint declaration. That's not what I said, and that would be a misrepresentation. I want to respect your opinion, my sister, but I have a problem with the Namibian government being called an Ovambo government. I know what you mean. I understand as a Namibian what you mean, but those kind of comments are not helping us to build a nation as Namibians. I think again, I don't want to confuse my German sisters and brothers with that, but we can have a conversation after this one. But I have a problem with that characterization. I want to talk about the resources. Somebody talked about the diamonds and so on, and I just want to give an example. Recently, I listened to a Norwegian government official that said, by law, all natural resources in Norway belongs to the government, belongs to the people. And they say they tax the international companies, if they come to, for example, explore oil, they tax them 78% taxes. And they cry and they kick and they are not happy, but they come. And they still get the oil, they sell it, and still they make a profit. 78% tax. Our Namibia, God blessed us with oil. We also discovered oil in Namibia. And our president was interviewed by Al Jazeera, and our president said, while the oil doesn't belong to us, the oil belongs to Shell. And we will be satisfied with the jobs that will be created. So it just shows you how multinational companies supported by their governments, tolerated by their governments, are continuing to exploit African governments until today and are not paying a fair share of their tax, and therefore we have so many resources, but we still live in poverty, as if we are not human beings, and let's leave it there. I think there are opportunities for partnerships. I've witnessed Namibian towns here having partnerships with towns between Namibian and German towns, where people-to-people conversations are starting to take place. So apart from these kind of platforms, I think those are also useful ones. So I'm really encouraging us to move and think out of the box, outside the official government agreements. What can we, as people to people that are progressively minded, that have the sense of solidarity, how can we work together to create this better future Namibian-German relationships? And I would like to, especially amongst our young people at schools, at universities, this kind of discussions and debates needs to take place so that we can really talk about the difficult questions of exploitation and resources, and how we can move forward to create a better society, better Namibia, a better Germany, and hopefully a better world. Thank you.
Vielen Dank. Jetzt werden wir Folgendes machen. Zunächst ein ganz kurzer Kommentar von mir. Auch der grüne Kolonialismus ist ein Kolonialismus. Wasserstoffe entwickeln mit afrikanischen Ressourcen, mit afrikanischen erneuerbaren Ressourcen, um Wasserstoffe nach Deutschland zu exportieren oder in die EU, um hier Stahlindustrie und andere schwere Industrien zu retten. Das verlangt, dass wir uns vor Augen führen, wir sprechen hier von Energiewende. Wir beziehen uns auf Länder, die nichts zu wenden haben, weil sie noch unter Energiearmut leiden. Nur so viel dazu. Jetzt möchte ich ganz kurz, wir werden Folgendes machen, wir hören einen kurzen Kommentar, weil wir von Allianzen gesprochen haben mit anderen afrikanischen Ländern, die die gleichen koloniale Prozesse erleben und die gleichen Verhandlungen vor sich haben. Abdul wird uns eine kurze Nachricht vorlesen. Abdul Bukhari kommt von Nicole Amusu, die mit uns hier sein wollte, aber sie ist erkrankt. Danach gucken wir uns den Film an. Der dauert nur 7 Minuten. Und wenn der Film vorbei ist, dann kommen wir hier zurück. Jeder hat 2 Minuten, um eine Empfehlung zu formulieren. Dann gibt es eine Danksagung von mir. Und pünktlich, wie versprochen, um 20:15 Uhr sind wir raus aus diesem Raum. Abdul zunächst. Und dazu, Abdul ist vor 2 Tagen aus Benin gekommen. Und er ist an diesem, weil wir von Allianzen gesprochen haben, das ist wichtig. Letztes Jahr, und ich sehe Jenny Mushegera, da arbeitet jetzt bei Miserio, und vielen Dank für die finanzielle Unterstützung durch Miserio für diese Konferenz. Aber letztes Jahr haben wir Afrika neu denken auch in Frankfurt gemacht zu diesem Thema. Nandi war Part davon, aber auch Sima. Und Abdul und sein Team haben Online-Support für diese Konferenz gemacht. Was passiert war, dass wir eine Präsenzveranstaltung haben wollten. Am Ende hatten wir so 35 Personen aus Deutschland im Raum in Deutschland, aber über 80 Personen aus verschiedenen afrikanischen Ländern online. Vor allem aus Benin, aus dem Senegal, aus Kamerun, aus Namibia, Botswana und aus Südafrika. Und Abdul war schon Teil dieser Veranstaltung.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Boniface, for this great introduction. And I'm Abdul, as Dr. Boniface already said. I'm very happy to be there this night. And it was also a pleasure for me, let me say the privilege to be there for this second time of Africa Denken, because I was traveling just 2 days ago from my country. I'm Beninese. I live at Benin. I just come here to support my team from Black Academy project in Mannheim, where we work on issues of power structure, decolonialism, and also the post-continuity coloniality. So I'm there on behalf of our team, Please for Africa, to give us some input about this great exchange that Ovaherero's community already shared with us. This subject is very close to our hearts. And I believe that the experience of the Namibian process is in the subject of restitution must be very inspiring, specifically we, the young people from West African countries. Because the topic of restitution is really broad subject that touch a financial, cultural, political, and also economical field. Let me say many fields in the world. If I take the whole of my country, Benin, former Dahomey, the political story of the country show that the support of Mino women, known under the name of Amazon, is a great example, for example. This army of women who make the history of the country was unfortunately exterminated during the fight against the French troops. It is an human loss that has also led to loss of value of feminists in African context. If we take the case of Congo, for example, with the relation of exploitation and extermination with the Belgium, it is also for us a story that we need to be seen closely. So, we have great historical background to review with the European countries, and Namibian will show us a great example this night. And as the doctor already mentioned, we already, from our side, try to give our contribution by our workshop, by our online conference with this community. We must support the cause of the Namibian activists, but also learn from their journey to keep in touch with this subject. European countries must take responsibility because it is a symbol of recognition of a past era. It's also a good example for a new generation to know that humanity distanced itself from the atrocity of the past. And I want to finish my floor to say, as Mr. Stemper already mentioned it, a better future is possible. I believe that it's very possible, and let us work together to change the narrative. Thank you.
So, jetzt würde ich unseren Techniker, ich habe wahrgenommen, es gab andere Hände hoch. Leider ist es so, dass wir langsam zu Ende kommen wollen. Wenn unser Techniker bereit ist, werden wir den Kurzfilm zeigen. Das ist ein Kurzfilm, der heißt Differences, gemacht von einem Filmteam aus Windhoek. Das ist ein Ehepaar, hat eine Produktionsfirma für Filme und ein Film, an dem sie beteiligt sind zum deutschen Kolonialismus, kommt in die Kinos nächstes Jahr, zu Beginn von 2023. Der ursprüngliche Titel war Ein Platz unter der Sonne. Das ist die Idee, dass Deutschland auch seine Kolonien erobern sollte, genau wie die anderen. Wahrscheinlich wird das ein anderer Titel sein. Aber jetzt sehen wir Differences und danach kommen wir hier, um die Veranstaltung abzuschließen.
Hello? It's mute.
Gentlemen, on the way out, pass by my office. Gentlemen, it's great what we have achieved in this country. Look at you. You are just like one nation. Having the three of you here, you are just the same as brothers. Keep up the good work, gentlemen, and have a great day.
Nein, wir sind nicht gleich. Wir sind definitiv verschieden.
Nee, uns ist definitiv wie dieses Jahr aufgelegt. Uns ist verschollen.
Gute Nacht, mein Schatz.
Gute Nacht.
Oh, no final tipo de nada, Mónica. Igual.
Juffrouw?
Nein.
Over here.
Wat schoot ik je slechte droom gehad?
Ist das ein Albtraum, Tobias? Komm zurück ins Bett. Komm. Komm zurück ins Bett. Komm.
Can I use your phone?
Yeah, sure. This is my wife and I.
Oh. You know, I never really looked at this picture before.
It's true. I've never seen you guys' pictures. Beatrice, can I have a look at your picture?
Yeah, sure.
Can I see your picture, Pandolini?
Sure.
It's gonna be winter soon.
Then we start to freeze again.
Yeah, times are changing.
Exactly.
Vielen Dank für den Applaus. Ich werde den an Joel und Sophie weitergeben. Ein kurzer Kommentar. Sie haben uns erzählt in Windhoek, als wir uns den Film angeguckt haben und viele andere, die Sie gemacht haben, der beruht auf wahren Begebenheiten. Menschen, die so zusammengearbeitet haben und lange nie miteinander zu tun hatten, nie miteinander gesprochen haben. Ich glaube, wenn wir Zeit hätten, hätten die namibischen Kolleginnen noch weitere Geschichten dazu erzählen können. Aber jetzt haben wir diese Zeit nicht mehr. Ich hatte versprochen, pünktlich, aber 3 Minuten hätten Sie noch. Ich würde die Gelegenheit geben, dass Evelyn in 1 Minute, Heike in 1 Minute, Nandi eine und Comrade O ein Schlusswort sagt, und dann würde ich das Ganze hier ganz kurz abrunden und wir sagen Tschüss und dann geht es weiter mit anderen Aktivitäten. Wir beginnen mit Evelyn. Evelyn, you have 1 minute. What do you want to tell us in 1 minute?
Thank you very much. In 1 minute, I would say, not yet Uhuru. This struggle continues, a luta continua. We will get what we want. Our voices will be heard, but most of all, we request the international community to help us fight this giant, Germany, so that they can hear us. Reparations or nothing. Nothing without us, nothing about us without us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Heike?
Just a few words to Germany. Germany must finally recognize and embrace its colonial history as part of European history, and specifically, of course, the terrible colonial violence and the genocide that Germany committed in Namibia. In order to get Germany to that, and in order to also get some of the issues addressed that some of the Namibian colleagues have saying about the Namibian government, that also means that people from within civil society and activists and artists must get together and mobilize and be active.
Thank you very much. Siyabonga. Comrade Ruru.
Yes, I just want to say that I think German citizens have the opportunity to put pressure on their government to open up the process for renegotiation and not to just arrogantly say it's full stop, we've already initialed, there's nothing to go back to. We have the power, the opportunity as Namibians to put pressure on our government to open up the process, be more inclusive, accommodating, compromising, so that we are able to move forward. We don't have to wait for these two governments to one day sign this agreement. We as the people of Germany and Namibia can start to move closer to each other. The big revolutions of this world were not started by mass of people. It was started with an individual making a decision that I'm going to be part of the change that I want to see. So all of us in this room, individually, if we decide to be part of the change, I think we can change the world. And this is part of a wider struggle for social justice. Genocide is just one platform, but there are many other struggles for justice that we have to join to make sure that injustice anywhere in the world is not tolerated, so that all of us can live in peace and can enjoy human dignity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nandi?
Yes, as the last word, I think I want to say that as a people who were targeted indirectly, targeted and twisted out by the German extermination order, we stand ready to engage in a serious process. Because what is currently on the table, that is the joint declaration, to us, it is a non-starter. It is flawed both in substance but also in framework, so it is not something that can be worked on because it is development aid. And our pursuit, our struggle is about reparations. And these are two things that are that stands distinctly apart from each other. And as I have said earlier, this is a struggle that was handed down to us from other generations with the right of inheritance, but also with the responsibility to make sure we do not compromise on it. So we are not going to be rushed by any government. Yes, we have needs, but we are not going to be rushed to enter into something that is just a gimmick. We will continue to wait for a serious partner on the German side. And of course, just to go back to what my brother have said, that in Namibia there are about 4,000 or so German males who hold this land. So it is your duty as Germans to really decide whether you want your country to be held hostage by just those 4,000 Germans in Namibia who don't want to give or to share land that they know it's a loot. That is your decision. Do you want your country to continue being held hostage and defending those people who are deliberately refusing to move forward and find a solution to this or not?
Thank you very much. So, vielen Dank. Zunächst an die Panelistinnen. Evelyn ist online, Heike ist online, vielen Dank. Uru und an die Sie sind hier vor uns. Ihr seid alle aktiv seit 16 Uhr. Vielen Dank für die Inputs und die Diskussionen. Vielen Dank an unsere Praktikantinnen. Ich sehe noch Vincent da und Lara Williams. Meine Kollegin ist da und noch Moritz ist auch da. Vielen Dank. Und vor allem vielen Dank auch. Wir haben Unterstützung bekommen von Sylvie Paulette Ngo als Dolmetscherin. Die Besonderheit ist, dass wir auf die Ressourcen der Diaspora zurückgegriffen haben und sie hat das ganz alleine gemacht, was eigentlich nicht geht. Aber du verstehst, wie das zustande gekommen ist. Dann habe ich noch eine Bitte. Diese Idee, dass wir weiterhin Druck aufbauen, vielleicht mit einer Revolution. Die Verbindung ist die, es gibt in den Verhandlungen mit den Opfern oder Nachkommen der Opfer des Terroranschlags 72 in München. Es kam zu einem Quark zwischen der Bundesregierung und den Familien der Nachkommen, weil die Summe, die die Bundesregierung ins Spiel gebracht hat, viel zu niedrig war. Es kam Bewegung in den letzten Tagen, damit die Familien akzeptieren, nach München zu kommen, um sich zu versöhnen. Daran haben gewirkt unter anderem deutsche Künstler, Künstlerinnen, Kabarettistinnen, die vermittelt haben. Wir brauchen sowas auch im Blick auf das Versöhnungsabkommen oder die Verhandlungen mit Namibia. Und wir brauchen vor allem, wenn wir diese Petition starten, wenn wir diese Resolution starten, wie die Idee im Raum ist, wir werden sie machen, dass Sie, die hier sind, Sie unterstützen, auch in euren Netzwerken dafür werbt, dass wir genug Stimmen dahinter bekommen, um auch etwas bewirken zu können. Letztes Jahr haben wir ein Buch herausgegeben, ein Büchlein, Namibia, gestohlene Vergangenheit, verhinderte Zukunft. Mit einigen Beiträgen, die Themen, die wir heute Abend diskutiert haben, analysieren. Das ist nicht kostenlos zu bekommen, weil nicht alles eine Frage von Kosten ist. das ist nicht gratis, weil wir uns die Mühe nicht umsonst gemacht haben. Das ist auch nicht umsonst. Das ist auch nicht gegen Spende, weil das eine verschleierte Verkaufsstrategie wäre. Das ist ein Geschenk. Also Sie können diese Publikation mitnehmen, wenn Sie wollen. Als ganz wirklich Schluss, Danksagung, Daniela, die ist unsere Hausherrin, wie man schön sagt, noch mit Kind bis zu späten Stunden. Vielen Dank und mit dir auch Dank an unseren Techniker, der alles heute Abend gemacht hat. Und vielen Dank an meine beiden Kolleginnen Serai und Julia, die den ersten Teil der Veranstaltung mit moderiert haben. Wir hatten geplant, dass wir noch die Räumlichkeiten, die schönen Räumlichkeiten des Hauses am Doms nutzen können bis ungefähr 21 Uhr. Wir müssen das nicht, aber wir dürfen das. Vielen Dank und bis zum nächsten Mal.